Welcome to Alabama International Motor Speedway, Talladega, the world's fastest race course. Benny Parsons has set an all-time record qualifying here at over 200 miles an hour. And Larry Nuber, it was a long time in coming.
Bob, it really was. The track record was set 12 years ago, the second time the Grand National cars ever raced at this tremendous facility. You might recall the cars, a lot of them referred to as trick cars, but technology has caught back up with basically where we were 12 years ago. And Bob, if all things go right, we may be in store for the fastest 500-mile race in auto racing history.
Also on our crew today is the editor of Stock Car Racing magazine, Dick Berggren, who's covering the pit activity for us. Dick?
We can anticipate at least 5 pit stops. The most important of those certainly will be the last. That's where the winning strategy will be decided. Some of the teams will surely go with new tires and with a full load of fuel. Some of them are going to try to squeak by with what they can get. It's going to be a wide open, exciting, wild afternoon.
188 laps on this 2.66 mile course, and we'll be back for our live coverage of this exciting Winston Cup race in just a moment. It's a beautiful day in Alabama. Here is the starting lineup for the Winston 500. On the front row, Benny Parsons from Ellerbe, North Carolina in the Stacy Pontiac, qualified at over 200 miles an hour. Outside, Darrell Waltrip from Franklin, Tennessee in the Mountain Dew Buick. In row number 2 will be Ricky Rudd from Chesapeake, Virginia. Ricky is driving the Piedmont Airlines Pontiac. Alongside will be Terry Labonte from Corpus Christi, Texas in the Stacy Buick. Third row, Jeff Bodine from Pleasant Garden, North Carolina in the Performance Connection Pontiac. And Cale Yarborough from Timmonsville, South Carolina in the Valvoline Buick. Fourth row, Bill Elliott driving the Melling Tool Ford, and Ron Bouchard in the J.D. Stacy Buick. Fifth row, Richard Petty from Randallman, North Carolina in the STP Pontiac, and Dave Marcus in the J.D. Stacy Buick. 40 cars in all. We will give you more on the other drivers competing in the race as we have the time. Meanwhile, the cars come off of turn number 4 onto the tri-oval. And we anticipate a green this time around. The crowd rises to its feet, each cheering his particular favorite in this competition. Many drivers capable of winning this race, and we'll see speeds well in excess of 200 miles an hour. We'll see drafting, we'll see slingshotting, and right now we see the green flag as the Winston 500 from Talladega, Alabama is underway.
Bob, we've visited a lot of racetracks on ESPN television the last couple of years, but I'll tell you, there is no roar greater in all of automobile racing than the start of a race at Talladega. They are 2, 3, 4, and even 5 rows wide as they come out of turn 2 and go down the long backstretch.
And it's basically a side-by-side competition. They're pretty much the way they started down the backstretch, with Parsons on the inside, Darrell Waltrip on the outside of the front row, and Ricky Rudd and Terry Labonte in the second row, still side by side through turn number 4, coming off 33-degree banking onto the tri-oval that's banked 18 degrees in front of the over 100,000 people gathered here to watch this tremendous competition. It is going to be Benny Parsons who leads just slightly. No, maybe Darrell Waltrip by a bumper leads lap number 1 again into turn number 1. It's still Parsons and Waltrip running side by side.
Bob, one of the most incredible first laps in the history of automobile racing. It looks like they're getting ready for the start. The lead draft is about 25 cars long, and look at them, they're still stacked up side by side. Ricky Rudd begins to make a move on the inside.
And so does Cale Yarborough down the backstretch. Ricky Rudd is the leader at this point. Yarborough running right alongside Waltrip in turn number 4. Here they come off of the banking now, entering the tri-oval once again. This track is shaped in the form of a tri-oval. There is no front straightaway. Instead, a 5th turn right here at our broadcast position. The starting line is located at the long end of the tri-oval near turn number 1. Rudd, Waltrip, Labonte, and running in 4th position side by side would be Benny Parsons, and behind him, Richard Petty.
Well, you get an idea of how quickly things can change in one lap. The driver who started on the pole, Benny Parsons, came by basically in a virtual dead heat for first place, as we see Waltrip now going to the inside of Waltrip, and or rather to the inside of Rudd, and following Waltrip through is Labonte. Parsons dropped from first to fourth in just one lap on this tremendously huge speedway.
And Benny Parsons, though, has worked back up into third position. The leader is Darrell Waltrip coming off of the fourth turn. Right behind him, tucked in a draft position, is Terry Labonte. In third position now would be Benny Parsons. Here they come across the start-finish line, completing lap number 3. Parsons running third. Running in fourth position is Geoff Bodine, and Ricky Rudd, who was leading a lap ago, is back in fifth.
Well, these two happen very rapidly here. As you see, Waltrip now, a position he's become very accustomed to the last couple of seasons on the Grand National Trail. Without a doubt, the most prolifically winning team of the past 2 seasons, Darrell Waltrip, the team, of course, that's headed up by the legendary Junior Johnson, the man who has put together more championships with different drivers than any other crew chief on the trail.
Darrell Waltrip and Terry Labonte running 1-2. Terry Labonte is the current points leader for the Winston Cup. He is from Corpus Christi, Texas, and he is 25 years of age, driving the J.D. Stacy Buick. Now Darrell Waltrip puts himself into front position as we complete lap number 4. Still a choo-choo train down the tri-oval here as they head into turn number 1 again. There are about, I would say, 25 to 30 cars in this lead draft. Then we have about a half a turn before we get back to the stragglers at this point. But it's a long race, Larry. Anybody can win this competition.
Bob, you're exactly right on the lead draft count as we see Labonte now deciding it's time for him to take the vanguard here in this race. The first time Terry Labonte has led. They're running back in the middle of this. And we have a spin and a crash in the backstretch. David Simcoe, the young driver from Michigan, participating in his first ever Grand National race here at Talladega, has obviously made some contact with one of the retaining walls here at the Speedway. David Simcoe, who raced in an ARCA race here yesterday. He also was involved in a crash at Daytona back in February.
Heavy damage to that race car. David Simcoe from Clarkston, Michigan, driving the Mound Steel Pontiac. And as you can see, the NASCAR officials have moved into a position to signal the drivers that the racetrack is under caution. It looks like David Simcoe is okay. He has crawled out of his race car, and so we will take this break. You're watching live coverage of the Winston 500 from Talladega, Alabama. We have 5 laps completed, and Terry Labonte is being shown as the leader. Back at Talladega, Alabama, where the Winston 500 is under caution. Here is the top 10 at this time, and we have completed 6 laps. The leader, Terry Labonte, running in second position is Benny Parsons. Third is Darrell Waltrip. Fourth is Geoff Bodine, and fifth is Ricky Rudd. Running in sixth position, Dale Earnhardt. Seventh is Richard Petty. Eighth, Ron Bouchard. Ninth is Cale Yarborough. And 10th is Bobby Allison. We had taken you through the top 5 rows. Here are the other starters. In the 6th row, Mark Martin and Bobby Allison. 7th row, Buddy Baker and Harry Gant. 8th row, Kyle Petty and Morgan Shepherd. In the 9th row, Donnie Allison and Elliott Forbes Robinson. The 10th row, Neil Bonnet and Dale Earnhardt. In the 11th row, Joe Ruttman and Rick Wilson. The 12th row, Lenny Pond and Tim Richmond. Row number 13, Philip Duffy. And in the outside of row number 13 is Lowell Cowell. The 14th row, Steve Moore and Lake Speed. 15th row, David Simcoe and John Anderson. Row number 16, D.K. Ulrich and Buddy Arrington. 17th row, Jimmy Means and Jody Ridley. Row number 18, Tommy Gale and L.W. Wright. The 19th row, Slick Johnson and J.D. McDuffie. And in row number 20, Bill Scott and Farrell Harris. We are yellow because of an accident involving David Simcoe. This racetrack is indeed fast. Some specifications on it for you as we watch the cars behind the pace car. The track is 2.66 miles in length. The north and south turns are banked at 33 degrees. The tri-oval is 4,300 feet in length and banked at 18 degrees. The backstretch is 4,000 feet. The racing surface is 48 feet wide and a 12-foot apron. The retaining wall is 4 feet high in the tri-oval and 7 feet at the grandstand. You really cannot get an idea of how steeply banked these turns are until you get right down on the racing surface. Larry Newber had an opportunity to examine a little bit more closely exactly how steep these turns are banked, and therefore how fast the cars can go here at Alabama International Motor Speedway.
The Alabama International Motor Speedway, Talladega, the Big T, whatever you choose to refer to it as. Most people think of adjectives when they think of this place, and the one that comes to mind most often is awesome. 2.66 miles in length, not only the world's longest closed course racetrack, but it's also the world's fastest speedway. But perhaps the most significant factor of this racetrack is the banking. I, for instance, am about 50 feet above the ground, and I'm not even near the racing surface, and believe me, it's not a very comfortable feeling up here. I'm just level with the outer wall on this racetrack. The racetrack is 48 feet wide, but it's banked 33 degrees. May not sound like very much, but when you stretch 33 degrees over 48 feet, what you get is a racetrack that is conducive to extremely high speeds. For instance, the Grand National cars, for the first time in Grand National history, qualified at better than 200 miles per hour for this weekend's race. And about 10 years ago, Mark Donohue took a specially prepared Porsche around this racetrack at 221 miles per hour. It's a very impressive race plant. For instance, behind me is an infield that could accommodate 31 Rose Bowls, and that includes the playing field as well as the grandstands. The driver entering the turns here at Talladega sees nothing but a wall of blacktop. And in all of automobile racing, those turns in Talladega may well be the ultimate high.
We are still under caution in the Winston 500. We have completed 8 laps now. David Simcoe has had an accident on the racetrack. David climbed out of the car and apparently is okay, but we are under a caution. The cars are slowed. Terry Labonte, your leader right now, with Benny Parsons running second and Darrell Waltrip third. Several cars came into the pits just a few minutes ago. Among them, this car, the number 75, Mike Kerr Pontiac, driven by Joe Ruttman from Upland, California. He is 37 years of age. We have seen some smoke coming from that car on the racetrack.
Well, Joe Ruttman picked up the sponsor of Mike Kerr just before the race green flag dropped this morning. Mike Kerr is a man who's been involved in the music profession as well as sponsoring race cars for quite a number of years. He's the lieutenant governor of the state of California, and he's been a good friend to a lot of people in racing, particularly some of the small teams, Bob, who need those extra dollars race day morning.
Perhaps we can get more on this situation from Dick Berggren in the pit area.
Joe Ruttman has been in twice. The problem is a leaking valve cover gasket. The crew anticipates his return again. They're going to try to fix it and get him back out again.
Well, Joe Ruttman has been driving this car only for a portion of the season. Of course, he started the season driving the number 2 car that Tim Richmond has taken over. And Ruttman's best finish so far this year has been a 3rd place at the Daytona 500. So Joe Ruttman has his problems here in the early going of the Winston 500.
Bob, the first incident that we have seen here is an example of one of the things that NASCAR people feared here this week. We had the most rookies ever entered in a Talladega Race 7, and among those rookies was Dave Simcoe.
Benny Parsons was the pole sitter in this race at a speed of over 200.176 miles an hour, and Larry Newber had an opportunity to ask him if he was surprised at his qualifying time.
Well, as a matter of fact, I was. There was some talk about a 200-mile-an-hour lap before we came down here. I did not believe it would happen. I was pleasantly surprised it did happen, and it happened to us.
Is it an advantage to start on the pole for this race?
Oh, I don't know. It's no advantage as far as winning the race is concerned. The only advantage being that if there is an accident in the first few laps of the race, and back about the middle of the pack, at least you wouldn't be back there. You should be somewhere near the front.
Benny Parsons is running in 2nd position at this time, with Terry Labonte still the leader, and Joe Ruttman is back in the pit area, and the hood is up on that car, and so there is very definite, serious problems with this automobile.
Well, the crew chief that Benny Parsons is driving for is one who is certainly no stranger to victory lane following qualifying. He may well be NASCAR's most quick crew chief, if you will. Waddell Wilson, of course, they sat on the pole at Daytona this year. And also, this team has won the last 2 Winston 500s here in Talladega. So Benny Parsons will definitely be a force to be reckoned with all day long, not just in the early laps here.
The pace car has pulled off of the racetrack, and we anticipate a green. The crowd rises to its feet to watch the restart. Here comes the leader, Terry Labonte, through the tri-oval, and Harold Kinder, the official starter for NASCAR, waves the green, and we're back under race conditions with 10 laps completed. Terry Labonte, followed by Benny Parsons into turn number 1, 33 degrees of banking. Running in third position at this time, Darrell Waltrip. The cars spread out fairly equally in the first three positions. We go down the backstretch now and watch to see if Benny Parsons will make a move to the inside of Labonte. Parsons does duck to the inside and passes Terry Labonte, but so does Darrell Waltrip, and so does Geoff Bodine. So a tremendous change of position here down the backstretch. They go into turn number 3, and it's still Darrell Waltrip running in first position. Second now, Benny Parsons. Third, Geoff Bodine. Off of turn number 4 again onto the tri-oval. Darrell Waltrip showing the way in the Mountain Dew Buick.
This moment right here when we cross the start-finish line may well be the high water mark in the career of the driver in third place, Geoff Bodine, the modified driver from the Northeast, who has been struggling for so very many years to get a competitive Grand National ride, runs in third position behind that man, Darrell Waltrip, and the man running in second place, Benny Parsons, who looks like he's got some ideas of taking back the #1 position, Bob.
Darrell Waltrip, of course, the defending champion of the NASCAR division. He is in second place at this time in the 1982 Winston Cup point standings. He has moved from first to third here in just a very few feet. It is now Benny Parsons running in the lead, followed by Geoff Bodine. Side by side into the tri-oval would be Darrell Waltrip and Terry Labonte. Labonte dropping back just a little bit and moving up into fourth position as they come by us under the start-finish line. In fourth position now is Dale Earnhardt, and he has made a significant move from the 20th starting position to fourth and looking toward the outside, and an opportunity to pass Darrell Waltrip off of turn number 2 onto the backstretch. Dale Earnhardt is moving. Here are the first 4 cars now as they go down the backstretch.
Earnhardt again is right there in the blue and yellow number 15, the Wrangler car. Earnhardt qualified for the 20th fastest position in this race, so he has moved up 17 positions within the first 10 laps, and look where he is running, up on the high side. You're not really supposed to be able to get around the high side of another Grand National driver at that point on the racetrack, but that's where Earnhardt has been all 12 of these first laps.
Dale Earnhardt has a victory in the 1982 season. He was the winner at Darlington. His finish at Bristol was second. He finished third at North Wilkesboro and fourth at Richmond. So Dale Earnhardt is indeed doing a great job this year. He is currently 6th in the Winston Cup points for 1982. It is still Benny Parsons, the leader here, with 13 laps completed. And Geoff Bodine running second. Dale Earnhardt looking to go around the Bodine car on the backstretch. We'll see if any positions change here. They do not into turn number 3. Bodine tucked right in behind Benny Parsons. Now we see Dale Earnhardt going to the high side of Bodine in turn number 4. And they're side by side for second position coming into the tri-oval. A great race for second place between Dale Earnhardt and Geoff Bodine.
Bob, and Bodine is out of the draft. He's down on the inside lane all by himself. The black flag coming out for one of the back markers as we pass across the start-finish line this time. Bodine, look where he is positioned. Perhaps a little bit of inexperience on the young driver. Well, he's not that young, but inexperienced in terms of his years in Grand National driving as we go back up front to check on the progress of our leader, Benny Parsons, and the progress is quite fine, thank you. There's the interval between first and second. Watch Earnhardt. He's a very aggressive driver, and Bob, he's handling perfectly. You can tell that Dale has the optimum confidence in the race car. He's putting that car right now on the racetrack where nobody else is driving. Every once in a while, you see a little debris. It looks like smoke coming from underneath the race car. What's going on is he's running in a lane where nobody else has been. He's kicking up some of the dust and some of the quick dry from earlier races on this speedway this week. Everything is okay. Earnhardt just is feeling real racy.
22 cars in the lead draft. They're being led by Benny Parsons. Second place belongs to Dale Earnhardt, and third is Geoff Bodine. The car that was given the black flag a lap ago was L.W. Wright from Nashville, Tennessee in the Music City Racing Chevy. So L.W. Wright again given the black flag as he passes by us, and Wright has been ordered to the pit area. Now Dale Earnhardt is looking to go around Benny Parsons here on the backstretch. Parsons has led for the past few laps, but Dale Earnhardt, who has moved up strongly from 20th starting position, is looking strong in turn number 3. Here they are, off of the 4th turn onto the tri-oval. Dale Earnhardt trying to assume first place from Benny Parsons, and Parsons has looked strong in the early going here. Again, his qualifying speed here at Talladega, Alabama was 200.176. Look how close they are in the draft. In the first turn, and 16 laps have been completed. Let's go to Nick Bergeron.
Really flying. Where is all the speed coming from?
Well, you know, we started this place. We worked our way up to the front right now. We got Benny Parsons in the lead, and we're right running second, so it's a good tow right now with a Ford and one of them Pontiacs really running, so that's what caused all the excess speed right now.
You were way ahead of all the rest of the cars to the grid this morning. Are you guys that confident?
Well, we were ready for him.
There's a caution. Bud Moore's left. There's a caution on the speedway.
And we saw some smoke coming from an area of the backstretch off of turn number 2, and we will try to get a reading on exactly what has happened in that area of the racetrack. Nevertheless, the yellow is out with Benny Parsons crossing the start-finish line in the lead. We are still waiting to see exactly why we are under caution. We did, however, notice that there was some smoke in the backstretch. There is Jody Ridley's number 90 car, the Stacy Ford, apparently in some trouble as he is going very slowly on the racetrack. Jody from Chatsworth, Georgia, 39 years of age, and apparently Jody Ridley has had a problem with his car. We will have more live coverage of the Talladega 500, the Winston 500 from Talladega. At this point, 17 laps have been completed. The leader is Benny Parsons, second place Dale Earnhardt, and third is Darrell Waltrip. Well, they say the race is won and lost in the pit area, and if that's the case, why, the race is being won and lost right now. Look at this massive contention in the pit area, and
Bobby Allison looks like.
He hit one of the cars coming out of the pit area, and Bobby Allison has knocked loose the front bumper on the car, and that could spell disaster.
Bob, remember what happened at Daytona? What an ironic turn of events here. Bobby Allison, during the early stages of the Daytona 500, while on the track at racing speed, came in contact with another car, Cale Yarborough, and the rear bumper came off. This time he's had a collision in the pits, another minor collision, but that bumper is dragging on the ground. Allison will have to come in again.
The question is, do they take the bumper off? Do they try to repair it? What are they going to do?
Well, Bob, the first thing they'll do when they get that car back in the pits is find out exactly how permanent the structural damage is. The rivets that hold that bumper on and the part of the frame where it all connects, if that's not damaged or damaged slightly, they will try to put it back on because the cars are built and the aerodynamics are designed around every exterior piece on the machine. But obviously, if they've got a problem in attaching it, and time is of the essence here, they'll just rip the bumper off, and Bobby Allison will have to go with a tremendously aerodynamically altered nose.
And the front bumper carrying our ESPN logo there. We'll see what happens as Allison comes into the pit area. We had mentioned that there were 22 cars in that lead draft, and I am absolutely certain that all of them came in for a pit stop during this caution period. So now they go to work on this car. They're looking at the front end. They're jacking it up on the left side of the car, examining it to see if indeed they can repair it or whether it'll have to be ripped from the race car.
Now, no matter what happens, they'll send Bobby back out before the field comes around again. They'll keep him on the lead lap. The man with the jack, the permanent jack, that's Gary Nelson, the crew chief. It's his responsibility to make this decision. What do we do with this bumper? Do we fix it or do we rip it off? Gary has gotten the jack underneath the right front of the car. The field right now is on the backstretch. Be rest assured that there's another crewman watching, and it looks like they've got it repaired, Bob, by my count, less than 25 seconds. They had another crewman, of course, watching the field, telling him at all times exactly the progress of the field on the track underneath caution.
Well, it definitely looks like that Bobby Allison is going back into this race. We are still under caution, so we're going to take another break. 19 laps completed. Bob Jenkins, Larry Newber, and Dick Berggren back at Talladega, Alabama. Bobby Allison is still on the racetrack, and apparently the problem with the front bumper of that car has been corrected. We will answer that question perhaps just a little bit later when we get back to green. Bobby Allison, the winner of the Daytona 500 earlier this year.
Well, not only was he the winner of the Daytona 500 earlier this year, Bob, but he also won this race a year ago. And it was a year ago when he was caught in the pits when the green flag dropped after a mid-race pit stop. And he drove harder, I think, or at least as hard as any driver we saw all year long in 1981 during about a 20-lap segment, about 60% or 3/5 of the way through the race last year, when he knew he had to lead as many laps as he possibly could to get back on the lead lap with the leaders. He was successful in doing that, picked up at the tail of the field, went all the way through all the other front runners, and won the race.
Well, we'll be back here for another race at Talladega, Alabama, the NASCAR 200 for late model stock cars. Our first showing will be on Wednesday, May 26th at 8 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time, 5 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. Larry Moyer, the defending champion of the race, but he'll be challenged by Scott Stovall, among others. A race sponsored by the Auto Racing Club of America, ARCA, and it should be a tremendous event. Wednesday, May the 26th, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific Time.
Well, Bob, you had commented earlier that we saw Jody Ridley in the Junie Dunleavy machine motoring very slowly down around the bottom of the racetrack. Bobby Allison again coming in for probably a final check on how secure that front bumper is. There again you see the crew, Gary Nelson getting right down inside that machine. They're putting some electrician's tape on that to smooth out the aerodynamics. Obviously there's rough edges now on that car. A part of the bumper was probably torn away. And what they have done is smooth out the aerodynamics of the machine, and they are apparently convinced that the bumper is secured.
Bobby Allison is a competitor on any racetrack, whether it's a super speedway or a short track, and certainly had to be among the favorites going into this race, and still certainly is not out of the competition by any means, but it certainly was a somewhat of a disaster for him to encounter that little problem as he tried to move away from his pit, and the car hit another vehicle as it too was leaving the pit area.
Well, Bob, we finally have some definitive information on why the caution. Jody Ridley blew an engine.
We asked Bobby Allison about his competition here in the Winston 500 and who he considered to be the best competitor on this racetrack.
Well, it depends on who else is running. You know, some guys you want to be in front of, some guys you want to be drafting behind them. It depends on who's third and fourth. You know, how many cars there are in the line. It just depends on a lot of things, and you got to play that by ear as you get there.
Who looks really tough to you?
Well, of course, Benny with fast qualifying speed. You know, they're here now with Laughlin chassis under their car, and I think that'll help them here. So I think he's going to be the strong favorite. Darrell naturally with Junior Johnson's always got a bag full of tricks, and I'm sure they'll use all of them. There are several cars really running good. You know, I've watched a lot of practice, and Labonte's running good, Rudd's running good. You know, just a whole bunch of them.
Right now, the car in the lead is Joe Ruttman in the number 75, but that car is at least a lap down. The leader of the race is Darrell Waltrip, who is behind Joe Ruttman and moving up quickly. It's just a matter of time before Waltrip will get into the lead here and go by Joe Ruttman. We have 22 laps completed, and you can see Waltrip now moving up on Joe Ruttman to the outside of the racetrack in turn number 4. It is still Dale Earnhardt running in second position. They're down off of turn number 4 onto the tri-oval, and here is Waltrip leading Earnhardt.
Well, Joe Ruttman there in the light blue car on the right-hand side of your screen. He's been in the pits for a couple of long stops. He is 5 laps down. There goes the leaders on the high side, headed up by Waltrip, with Earnhardt trailing in second.
Perhaps more on the situation involving Bobby Allison. Here is Dick Berggren with the crew chief of Allison. And we see that Ron Bouchard is running very slowly on the racetrack. Ron, of course, won the last race that was held here at Talladega, Alabama last fall. But apparently Ron Bouchard in that Stacy Buick is encountering some problems here, running very slowly down the backstretch. No caution at this point. The cars are still on the throttle in the tri-oval.
Well, Bob, we do continue to run on green, so apparently none of the NASCAR observers around the racetrack have spotted any debris from the Bouchard car. But here's a guy who was running 200 miles per hour just yesterday and late on Friday, and somebody that a lot of the top crews were worried about. And Bouchard, we haven't even seen him come through the north turns yet. So Bouchard apparently was something that looks terminal.
All right, now let's go down to Dick Berggren in the pit area with Gary Nelson.
I'm with Gary Nelson, crew chief for Bobby Allison. Gary, what happened in that pit road incident?
Well, it's everybody pits at once. I'm really surprised more of these things don't happen. The cars just got together, had bent our bumper down. I think we've got it fixed now.
Do you think the bumper's going to stay on for the duration of the race?
Well, I sure hope so. It looked good to me. We'll see how the wind affects it. Maybe the fender will come. The fender's a little loose on the end, but I think.
Here's Gary Nelson, Bobby Allison's crew chief.
On the racetrack, it is still Darrell Waltrip showing the way. Dale Earnhardt is running in second position. Benny Parsons is third, and Terry Labonte is running fourth. Richard Petty now being shown in fifth position. The cars are down the backstretch. 25 laps have been completed.
Well, the Talladega racetrack, Bob, is really tough on equipment as we go back and look at Richard Petty and Rick Wilson. Rick Wilson, who started back in 22nd position, has just gone underneath the all-time king of Grand National stock car racing, Richard Petty. And our observers around the racetrack tell us that since this most recent green flag, Rick Wilson is really going. Now, there's a car that's crew chief by Dick Hutcherson, one of the all-time great names in stock car racing. He's been bringing this young driver around the past couple of seasons, and maybe they found something during the last caution, but Rick Wilson has really turned loose.
And he is running in fifth position. Rick is 29 years old from Bartow, Florida, and is driving the Wilson Racing Olds here this afternoon. Rick Wilson has moved into fifth. Richard Petty drops back to sixth position. So Rick Wilson certainly showing the way here. Earlier this week, we were watching practice at several times, and Rick Wilson, it appeared, was out with Dale Earnhardt on several occasions, learning to draft, perhaps, because they were following each other very closely.
Well, Bob, last year at Daytona, Rick Wilson was an unknown driver, and he was out on the big speedway trying to get somebody to allow him to hook up with him. We're talking about Rick Wilson as we go back up front and look at Waltrip leading Earnhardt. Earnhardt seems to be content right now to follow Darrell. Rick Wilson told us that the only guy back a year ago who was willing to take a chance and go out on the racetrack with him and help him learn how to draft was A.J. Foyt.
There are 4 cars in the lead draft. The 5th car in this lead draft is at least 1 lap down. That is Joe Ruttman. Here is Darrell Waltrip and Dale Earnhardt running in first and second positions, with Benny Parsons third. Terry Labonte is running fourth. Now running in fifth position is Richard Petty, as he was able to go by Rick Wilson. Now it is Benny Parsons moving to the inside of Dale Earnhardt on turn number 3, and Benny Parsons to the extreme inside of the racetrack and putting a challenge on Darrell Waltrip. Here they are off of the 4th turn onto the tri-oval. We could have a change of leader on this lap into 18-degree banking in front of the main grandstand. It is still Darrell Waltrip showing the way. In second place, Dale Earnhardt, and Benny Parsons settles back into third, makes no challenge.
Bob, you know, if I had a picture of the 1982 NASCAR season emblazoned in my brain at this point, it would be a picture that we keep seeing about every 4 or 5 seconds as we follow this lead pack. See that red car on the right-hand side of the screen? It seems like he's never in full screen. That's because he's always lurking right behind the 1st or 2nd position. All year this year, we've watched this young driver from Corpus Christi, Texas, Terry Labonte, be right where he is right now, just outside of your screen, but he's always around at the finish, and he leads the points where he has been all season long.
He finished 4th at Daytona, 5th at Richmond, 4th at Bristol, 8th at Atlanta, 2nd at Rockingham, 6th at Darlington, 2nd at North Wilkesboro. His worst finish of the year was the most recent race at Martinsville, Virginia, but Terry Labonte is indeed the leader in the 1982 battle for the Winston Cup, and right now runs in 4th position right behind Benny Parsons, Dale Earnhardt, and Darrell Waltrip. We have completed 29 laps of 188 that will make up the Winston 500.
Bob, to pick up on the story of attrition here in the early laps, 2 of the early favorites, we commented that Bouchard was running very slowly. Just about 2 laps ago, we finally saw him coast into the pit road. He made a sharp left turn, went immediately back to the garages, so apparently the Pittsburgh, Massachusetts Chargers day is over, and there will be no big surprise win again this year. Also, Cale Waltrip is already out of the race.
Waltrip began his racing career right here at Talladega, Alabama 10 years ago. Larry Newber, ask him about it.
Actually, I didn't get much attention the first time I came here. I was sort of an unknown, and towed down here from Charlotte, North Carolina with my 1971 Mercury, and was parked right down the end of the garage down here. Jake Elder and I were, and it was my first Grand National race, and I really didn't know too much about what was going on. I'd never seen a track this big or gone as fast as I was getting ready to go. So it was an exciting time for me. It's been 10 years ago almost to the day, so it's kind of fun to be back here, and at least I'm on the front row now. And, at that time, I was just worried about making the field, so that's quite a change in 10 years.
31 laps are about to be completed. This is how they're running. The leader, Darrell Waltrip. 2nd is Dale Earnhardt. 3rd, Benny Parsons. 4th is Terry Labonte. 5th place is Jeff Bodine. 6th is Richard Petty. In 7th position is Rick Wilson. In 8th position is the number 1 of Buddy Baker. Running 9th is Ricky Rudd. And 10th at this point is Neil Bonnet. Here is the race involving Rick Wilson and Richard Petty. Again, Wilson running very strong here at Talladega, has been drafting with Richard Petty for the last few laps.
Well, Bob, they're right in the middle of about a 19 or 20 car freight train that's up front. The light blue car there on the inside, 75, is Joe Ruttman. He's been given the black flag on the last 2 successive laps, but I don't think that Joe has had an opportunity to safely get himself out of the lead draft. He was running in 5th position in line, and I have a feeling he was just making certain, 1, that the flag was for him, and 2, that when he did make that move out of the lead draft, it was a safe one.
The report from the NASCAR officials is that the number 75 car of Joe Ruttman is leaking oil on the racetrack, so his crew will be checking that situation. Joe Ruttman into the pits once again, but out he goes, and perhaps he'll try to get back into competition. Darrell Waltrip is the leader at this point. Running in 2nd position, Dale Earnhardt. 3rd is Benny Parsons. 4th is Terry Labonte. And running in 5th position is Jeff Bodine. More of the Winston 500 from the world's fastest speedway in a minute. We have completed 32 laps of 188 that will make up this great race. Buddy Baker made a pit stop just a couple of seconds ago. He is back on the racetrack, but I don't think he's running up to speed. He is about to get lapped on the backstretch. So Buddy Baker, who was running in 8th position, does definitely have a problem as the car is very low on the racetrack and Buddy is running very slowly.
Well, Buddy Baker is maybe the most of the hard luck drivers, the most hard luck of all the guys who have had regular misfortune in Major League Stock Car Racing, but this racetrack has been perhaps the most kind to him. Buddy Baker has led 1,000 laps here at Talladega, and that is the all-time leader in that category, laps led at Talladega. He likes this place. He's been very fast on a regular basis.
Let's go down to Dick Berggren in the pit area for this report.
We've had 3 blown engines within a very few laps. Cale Yarborough lost his, Ronnie Bouchard lost his, and Jody Ridley lost his. That's part of the fact that Talladega is one of the most difficult racetracks on the circuit on engines. The drivers run wide open here. There is no moment at all to breathe, and if an engine is not exactly perfect, it simply will not stay together.
The report from NASCAR is that Buddy Baker was given the black flag for running over an air hose. He is back on the racetrack, however. Meanwhile, as they came by us just a few minutes ago, we checked on the progress of Bobby Allison, and unofficially, Bobby is in 18th position and out of the lead draft. Here is the completion of the 36th lap, with Waltrip still leading, Earnhardt 2nd, Benny Parsons 3rd, still Terry Labonte in 4th, and Jeff Bodine 5th. They have been running in that order for the past several laps. Nobody seems really anxious to make a move at this point.
Well, Allison is out of the lead draft, Bob, but right now as he goes into turn 1 and turn 2 on this 2.66 mile tri-oval, he has been hooked up with Elliott Forbes Robinson for about the past 10 or 12 laps, ever since he came out of the pits after repairing the front bumper. There's the Gatorade machine of Bobby Allison, and right behind him you'll find Elliott Forbes, and they've been making up a little bit of ground on the racetrack, although they don't seem to be closing in on the lead draft. But at this point, it's stand pat is what it is. He doesn't really need to really tire the race car. He can stay there, and during the next period of pit stops, they'll get caught back up again.
Bobby Allison running with Elliott Forbes Robinson on the track in 17th and 18th positions. We have a car that is stalled down here right below us at the start-finish line, the number 73 of Steve Moore, the Franklin City Music Park Pontiac, and now he gets the car running again and pulls back onto the racetrack right behind the leaders of this event, Darrell Waltrip.
Well, there's Allison continuing to tow around, to use Bud Moore's word that we picked up earlier. Elliott Forbes Robinson, the former road racer and Can-Am champion. You know, Elliott Forbes was very successful in road racing, Bob, and a lot of people I think have been surprised with the perseverance he has showed in Grand National racing. It's tough to break into this league, but Elliott Forbes has hung right in there the past couple of seasons. They picked up the Jolly Rancher Candies people as a sponsor, the Colorado-based company this year, and they've been a regular on the big racetracks, and Elliott Forbes is working very hard to learn this type of racing. He could probably go back, Bob, with almost any sports car team and probably move into a top 10 ride tomorrow. But he's interested in Grand National racing, and he's trying hard to learn.
This is only his third race of the season. He finished 28th at Daytona and 40th at Atlanta, and now in the competition here at Talladega this afternoon. Here is the battle for the position involving Rick Wilson and also Tim Richmond and Neil Bonnet. This is about the race for 10th position.
Well, you know, all day long I've been kind of keeping one of my eyes peeled on the Fords of Earnhardt. We got a caution flag on the racetrack, yellow flag coming out as the leaders approach the trial. It's a race to the start-finish line to determine how the field will motor around under caution. Earnhardt going to go for the lead as he comes through, but Waltrip holds on. There's the shot of the lead pack as they pass by us, past the start-finish line. You see the big Stacy emblem emblazoned on the tail of Tim Richmond's car. Richmond followed by Wilson. They're running about 7th or 8th on the racetrack. I think the caution might have been for Steve Moore. Bob, you commented about a minute ago that he was creeping out of the pit area. Now we've got something burning on the racetrack.
Looks like an area of grass down in one of the turns has caught fire for some reason. Perhaps that is the reason for the caution. We'll be checking that situation, but you can see a little bit of fire and smoke down there in the number 1 turn. In any case, the yellow is out, and we are under our 3rd caution of the day.
That is a most unusual reason for a caution flag. I don't know how the racing papers are going to report this caution. Caution for Infernal and on the pit, or rather in the infield area. But at any rate, this is turn 1 of this gigantic tri-oval racetrack. You're looking north, and you know there's still some flame on that. Steve Moore was running very slowly around the racetrack. I doubt that something would have spilled from the car to cause that big of a blaze, however. Here are the leaders into the pit area.
And this is Dale Earnhardt making a stop. The leader of the race, Darrell Waltrip, is also in. Several of the other front runners, as a matter of fact, most of the others are into the pit area for their 2nd stop of the day. We're watching the Earnhardt crew go to work. There is Darrell Waltrip on top, and we'll see who gets out of the pit area first. They're changing rubber on the left side of Darrell Waltrip's car. Now they begin to change the rubber on the left side of Dale Earnhardt's car. Waltrip is away first. Still work being done on the Earnhardt car. Waltrip is going to have a decided advantage coming out of the pit area. Remember, we still are under caution. And now Earnhardt begins to move away.
Well, Earnhardt, as he is shoved off by the crew headed by Bud Moore, you know, they made the decision to change all 4 tires. It took them maybe a little longer, obviously, as you saw on the screen, as it did the Junior Johnson crew. But in a situation like this, when we're early in the race, we're under caution flag, there really isn't any good reason to rush and maybe make a mistake. There's a long ways to go in this race. 188 laps. We're not even a quarter of the way through it yet. And so the trick here is to just stay near the front and stay in the lead draft.
41 laps have been completed.
Better race driver than Singer.
All right. 41 laps completed. We have had 8 leaders and 9 lead changes. We are under our 3rd caution of the day. This one we assume for a fire in the first turn in the grass, and it does not involve any race car or any person, but it involves an area of grass that has caught fire down in turn number 1. The crews are down there right now trying to extinguish the blaze, and I think they just about have it. But we still are under caution. Here are the cars that are out of the race. David Simcoe, L.W. Wright, Cale Yarborough, Ron Bouchard, Jody Ridley, and Steve Moore. Only one of those because of an accident. That was the David Simcoe incident on the 4th lap. The others have dropped out of competition because of mechanical problems. And we have Bouchard down in the pit area, Ron Bouchard with Dick Bergeron.
Ronnie Bouchard, you won here last time. Not such good luck today. The engine let go, we understand.
Yeah, we had some problems there. It was around lap 30. I think we come down the front straightaway here, and I think it must have broke a rod or a cylinder rod because it just come right apart.
What kind of shape is the racetrack in today, Ronnie?
Well, it's real quick. There's about 6 or 7 cars that can really run, and our car was performing terrific. The chassis was working good, and the motor was working good, and we was just kind of sitting, and it was just a shame it happened.
Who looks good to you that's still running out there?
Well, I would say up in the front, Darrell was running real strong, and Benny Parsons and Geoff is going good, and there was about 6 or 7 cars that were real strong in the front.
Ronnie Bouchard out of it with a blown engine.
Ronnie, of course, from Pittsburgh, Massachusetts. It's rather unusual to hear a NASCAR Winston Cup driver with an Eastern accent. Most of them, of course, from the South. But Ron Bouchard from Pittsburgh, Massachusetts is 33 years old and unfortunately is out of today's Winston 500.
And that team, Bob, came into 1982 with high hopes, and they didn't start out too bad. They had a 6th place finish at Daytona, of course, the opening race of the year, as well as being on the first Superspeedway race. They've had engine failure now 3 times on the big tracks, although their record of consistent finishes on the short tracks have been pretty good. They've had a couple of top 10 finishes, one at Richmond and another one at Bristol, but Bouchard is out of it today.
Morgan Shepherd in car number 98 is being shown as the leader at this point. Buddy Baker is the car behind the pace car, but Baker is a lap down. Meanwhile, Ricky Rudd also continues to run on the racetrack, and Ricky was one of the people we talked to, along with Ron Bouchard, concerning front steer and rear steer. An explanation from that from Dick Bergman and those two drivers.
2 basic types of front-end suspension geometry in Grand National racing. One of them, termed front steer, is exemplified by Ron Bouchard's J.D. Stacy car. The other, termed rear steer, the older design, is exemplified by Ricky Rudd's Piedmont Airlines car. In the front steer car, the steering geometry is all well ahead of the ball joint. Ronnie Bouchard, can you explain for us how this front steer works?
Well, this Mike Laughlin car is built with front steer, and the basic difference between a front steer and a rear steer is all the steering and the steering box is ahead of the tires, and this seems to make the car drive a lot better on super speedways.
You had your choice of front steer cars or rear steer cars here at Talladega. Why did you choose the front steer?
Well, I think the biggest reason we won the race here in the fall with a front steer car, and I think they drive a lot more comfortable. So we had a choice 4-1, so we took the front steer car.
An example of a rear steer car is Ricky Rudd's car. This was built from the ground up. Ricky, can you explain to us how this rear steer car works?
Well, basically, this car here is more or less a mirror image of the car that Ron's driving. Everything, instead of being in front of the ball joint, has just moved to behind the ball joint. Basically, the 2 cars handle a little bit differently. I think that the front steer car is maybe a little bit more stable up at the 200-mile-an-hour speeds that we'll be running out here on Sunday. This car here, I think, is, as far as speed-wise, is just as quick as the front steer, but it just tends to be a little bit more shaky at the high speeds.
Given your choice, would you prefer to have built the front steer or the rear steer that you finally wound up with?
Well, I think you really need one of each. I think the front steer car seems to drive a little bit better, a little bit more stable at a track like Daytona and Talladega. And I think the rear steer car like we have here is better at the tracks like Charlotte and Atlanta and places like that.
The front steer car is on the pole here at Talladega. In fact, the front row consists of front steer cars. Front steer is the new design. The old tried and true is the rear steer car.
Bobby Allison is driving a front steer car. Now, we mentioned a few minutes ago that he was running in 17th position and had fallen out of the lead draft. Now, however, with this caution period, he has been able to catch right back up with the leaders. So Bobby Allison apparently has suffered no serious ill effects from that incident in the pit area a few laps ago in which he hit another car and tore off the, at least tore apart the front bumper. However, the Gary Nelson crew has been able to make the adjustments and get that car back in racing condition.
You know, these front and rear steer cars, this phenomenon of the front steer cars, Bob, actually is one of the prodigy of the move that NASCAR made when they went to the downsized cars. There were several teams that were concerned about the stability of the smaller cars and the big racetracks, and what they actually did, they went back to what you might call the minor leagues or the feeder system to talk to some of the people who were running cars and been building cars on short tracks for a number of years. And the most noted of those was Mike Laughlin. And Richard Petty asked him to put together, if he could, a car that was designed with front steer to run on the big racetracks. And shortly thereafter, Richard won the Daytona 500. And that, needless to say, attracted a lot of attention to this new innovation in setting up the steering in the front end of the race cars called front steer.
The sun-baked crowd at Talladega again rises to its feet as the green flag is being displayed once again. We are back to racing at the 45th lap. Buddy Baker and Morgan Shepherd are running up front. Darrell Waltrip is officially in second position as the lead car. Buddy Baker in the number 1 is at least a lap down. Morgan Shepherd is the leader, but Darrell Waltrip is making a charge toward the front. He is closing in on Morgan Shepherd as they go down the backstretch. The 4th car on your screen is again the Joe Ruttman car, and that car also is not on the lead lap. Darrell Waltrip blowing by Morgan Shepherd and Buddy Baker, but look at Joe Ruttman. He's tucked in right behind Darrell Waltrip, and although not on the lead lap, Joe Ruttman is definitely at race speed. Now we see Benny Parsons moving to the inside of the track, and he will be shown in second place.
You know, Ruttman has shown a lot to the NASCAR contingent of 1982. It seems like almost every time we see the NASCAR Grand National division, Joe Ruttman is running near the front. He's had some really tough break. If you've been following our series all year, you remember that he was definitely the hot setup at Richmond, and just before the caution flag came out near the end of the race because of the rain, Joe unfortunately blew a tire coming out of the fourth turn and spun down the front stretch, which cost him victory. But Ruttman, despite being several laps down, our unofficial count is 5, runs right with the leaders, and Bob, he's been there about 20 laps.
And he is 5 or more laps down to the leader. Now we see Benny Parsons standing on the throttle in turn number 3, moving to the inside of Joe Ruttman. And he is also moving to the inside of Buddy Baker in the tri-oval. Darrell Waltrip is the leader with Benny Parsons running in second position. Parsons, the 4th car on your screen. Third place is the 5th car in that line. That is Morgan Shepherd. Then Terry Labonte, then Geoff Bodine, then Dave Marcus, and Dale Earnhardt.
Buddy Baker, incidentally, is 3 laps in arrears of the leaders. Remember, a few laps ago, he was running very slowly down on the bottom of the racetrack. He was black flagged and called in for an additional lap one time because he left the pit area before his pit grid was secure. He ran over the air hose, so he runs at 3 laps down, and Joe Ruttman in the light blue number 75, the Raymock racing car, runs 5 laps down.
We are covering the Winston 500 from Talladega, Alabama, the world's fastest racetrack. It's been an exciting race to this point. We still have many, many laps to go. We have completed 47. We have 151 laps to go. Darrell Waltrip is continuing to be the leader. And we will continue with more of our live coverage in just a moment from the world's fastest speedway. The Mountain Dew Buick of Darrell Waltrip is leading the Winston 500. Buddy Baker goes around Waltrip, but remember, Baker is not on the lead lap. Second position belongs to the J.D. Stacy Pontiac of Benny Parsons. Tremendous racing here. Running in third place is Terry Labonte, and fourth at this point would be Dale Earnhardt, who is doing a tremendous job out there.
Boy, I'll tell you, Bob, I don't know how you spell bravado, but I'm beginning to think it starts with the letter E. Look where Earnhardt is. He's been in a racing groove that nobody else has even been trying. We continue to see the dust from a racing lane that no other car has been on during this race kick off from the rear tires of Earnhardt, particularly when he blasted the tri-oval. His car must feel just incredibly stable underneath him because Earnhardt is really showing some aggression.
I'll tell you, his moves have been breathtaking. We watched him go through turn number 1 a few minutes ago, and he was way up on the outside of the track, almost to the retaining wall, but was able to gather it in and keep control and go around another car. Waltrip is the leader, Parsons second, Earnhardt is running third in that number 15 Wrangler Jeans Ford. Dale Earnhardt from Kannapolis, North Carolina, is 30 years of age and a former Winston Cup champion. Fourth position belongs to Terry Labonte. Buddy Baker in that number 1 car has fallen back a little bit, but still in the lead draft, but he is at least 3 laps down to the leaders.
A couple of years ago when Earnhardt won the NASCAR championship, that season made it possible for him to become the first driver in the history of U.S. racing to win $1 million and still be under the age of 30. And Dale just had a birthday a couple of days ago on Friday, qualifying day here. There he goes, back up top again. And now there's Geoff Bodine. We get a report from our spotters around the speedway that Geoff Bodine has slowed on the racetrack. He's dropped down off the banking onto the apron. The biggest chance in his career to perhaps make a name for himself in Grand National stock car racing, running Cliff Stewart's Performance Connection race car, drops down to the apron area and looks like he's headed home, Bob.
Geoff Bodine was running in 5th position, and the car is moving very slowly in the tri-oval, about to enter the pit area. As you can see, he has won more than 400 modified and sportsman racing and getting an opportunity this year to run the Grand National circuit when Joe Milliken was relieved of his duties, and Geoff Bodine is pulling behind the wall, indicating that that car is going to be out of competition. A tough break for the Pleasant Garden, North Carolina driver, Geoff Bodine, out of competition.
Well, Bodine has run quite a number of races in late model racing as well as modified cars. He also, early in his career, had some experience in a rear engine super modified, running at places like Oswego, New York. At one point, he was headed toward Indianapolis, but he has since long ago directed all of his efforts toward this circuit.
And on the racetrack, it is still Darrell Waltrip leading Dale Earnhardt by about 3 or 4 car lengths. Waltrip and Earnhardt, 1 and 2. Running in third position is Terry Labonte. One of the drivers we haven't talked very much about is the individual who won for the first time this year and for the first time in many, many tries after having finished second on several occasions. Harry Gant in the number 33 Skoal Bandit Buick.
Well, Harry is the former home builder who used to run only on the weekends, and as he expressed it, pounded nails and made chicken coops, he called them, all week long, and then jump in the van on Friday night and drive like a maniac, again quoting Harry, 200 or 300 miles to race on the weekends. And it's been his lifelong dream to be able to make a career and make it his sole profession, driving race cars. Harry has turned out to be one of the most popular drivers as we watch him run 6th and challenge Dave Marcus on the inside in that battle for 5th and 6th position. Harry has turned out to be one of the most popular drivers in Grand National racing.
Harry Gant, as we indicated, finally won a race, and Larry Newber asked him earlier this week about that second place jinx.
Well, you know, it's one of the biggest thrills of my life, the biggest race I've ever won probably, and you know, we won a lot of sportsman races. This is the first Grand National, but the whole team is really pumped up, and our sponsor, U.S. Tobacco, you know, the maker of the Skoal products and makes the Skoal Bandit possible, and Bert and Hal, you know, they all got a big thrill out of it. But really, we come here just like it would have been if we hadn't won last week. So we're trying to do the best we can do right now. We're running a little bit under speed, but we could win the race with some luck as good as we had Sunday. But, you know, relating this race to last Sunday, there's no, you know, we'd have come just like we would have if it had won or hadn't won.
And Harry Gant continuing to move up, now moving to the inside of Tim Richmond and Terry Labonte on the backstretch, as Tim Richmond is being passed severely by several of the drivers down the backstretch. Gant working to the inside of Terry Labonte and about to go to work on Buddy Baker in the 3rd and 4th turns. And you can see right behind Harry Gant is the Bobby Allison number 88 Gatorade Buick. So both of those drivers working to the inside of the racetrack, and Gant and Allison are both moving quickly here in the Tri-Oval. About to complete lap number 58. The leader continues to be Waltrip, with Earnhardt running in 2nd position, but Harry Gant looking strong in the inside of the racetrack, running 3rd.
Bob, they really are, both Gant and Allison. And you know, the interesting thing about what's going on here is normally, because of the banking here, particularly when you're right in the apex of the turns, Allison is slowing. Bobby Allison, I don't know if he lost the draft or something has gone wrong with that race car, but he is definitely off the pace that he's been the last couple of laps. We'll watch that one closely as they come past the main grandstands here. Some 50,000 people plus populating the main grandstands on the front stretch, commenting that usually you can run quicker up higher on the banking, but the last 2 laps by, Allison and Harry Gant were right down on the bottom of the speedway, and we're passing several cars. Now, Gant is ducked in the line in 2nd position. Allison has not slowed, but he pulled back up into the train in 2, 4, 6, 8 position. So I don't know why Allison let Harry Gant go, but they had a good thing going there for a couple of minutes.
Let's go down to Dick Bergman in the pit area for this report.
Neil Bonnet is having a problem communicating with his crew. The crew says that they've lost the radio in that automobile. They have no way of communicating with their driver.
Well, many years ago, of course, you communicated with your driver through a pit board and through hand signals, but most of the drivers now using the radios, and when those go out, you've got a real problem. Harry Gant has taken over the lead from Darrell Waltrip, and Dale Earnhardt has also gotten around Waltrip. So Harry Gant is being shown as the leader of the Winston 500. He will be shown as the leader of lap number 60. Earnhardt tucked in right behind him. Here they race to the start-finish line. Harry Gant, Dale Earnhardt, Darrell Waltrip, and then Terry Labonte.
Bob, you know, it's amazing. I tell you, the people in the South love their stock car racing. We're only on lap 60. We're about a third of the way through this race. And every time a pass is made, the entire stands from its seats like they are right now, watching the action on the racetrack. And again, as evidence of the popularity that Harry Gant has obtained in his brief years here on the trail, a big cheer went up from this Alabama crowd. Let's hear what they got to say now as Waltrip. He's a guy that a lot of them like to watch and a guy that a lot of them love to hate in some instances, but he's certainly one of the more well-known drivers in Grand National racing. We have a caution flag, a blown engine. I believe it was the number 17 car of Lake Speed, the former world go-karting champion. Lake behind the wheel of the Yazoo Mowers, number 95 Rock Buick. The car is owned and maintained by Roger Hamby, himself a former driver on the trail.
And there is Lake moving slowly down the backstretch. The NASCAR officials move onto the racetrack with their caution flags, and we are under our 4th period of the afternoon. There is Lake Speed in that Yazoo Mowers Buick. Lake is from Jackson, Mississippi, and 34 years of age.
Bob, you know, I want to expound a little bit more on this communication subject that came up a couple of seconds ago in regards to Neil Bonnet's situation. Recall that this is a tri-oval. Other racetracks on the trail that are simply an oval with 4 distinct turns, if the radio goes out, you can go back to the old chalkboard or pitboard system. But on a tri-oval, that's impossible because the racetrack juts out away from the pit area as the drivers and the race cars on the track at speed come by. So once the radio goes out on a tri-oval, you're out of business as far as verbal communications go, or visual communications.
And we anticipate a flurry of pit stop activity, and that is the case. Here is Harry Gant moving that Skoal Bandit Buick into the pit area, and Dale Earnhardt in 2nd position also makes the pit stop. We'll watch the crews go to work on the cars, and we will time Harry Gant's pit stop. The crew changing rubber on the right side of both of those cars, and of course a fresh tank of gasoline being put in. Now the Earnhardt crew moves to the other side of the car to change rubber on the left side. So does the Harry Gant crew. It looks like the Earnhardt crew, though, is leading here in this pit stop competition as they are working feverishly on the left side of the car. And now Dale Earnhardt moves away and beats Harry Gant out of the pit area by quite a few seconds. Gant now putting the car in reverse for a few seconds, now moving away, and it is a 39.8-second pit stop for Harry Gant as most of the drivers have gotten back into the competition.
Of course, another thing to take into consideration, not only did Gant get out 7 or 8 seconds later than what Earnhardt did, but several other cars passed by him while he was sitting there in those moments of agony. And there'll be about 8 to 10 cars separating Harry from Dale Earnhardt.
62 laps have been completed. We are in our 4th caution period. Terry Labonte is being shown as the leader.
I'm with Jeff Bodine in the pits. Jeff, you had the Performance Connection Pontiac absolutely flying out here today, and it's all over.
Well, sure is. No, I was just out there driving it, Dick. The guys prepared the car beautifully. The engine was working real good. I don't know what happened to it, but it's no fault of anyone's. It's just something broke inside. And, yeah, we were real happy with the way the car was going. They made a couple adjustments on a pit stop, and it was working real good. And, I'm really sad it's over with because I've been looking forward to this race all week because the car ran so well all week long. And, we'll just come back next time and try again.
You haven't had an awful lot of experience out here at Talladega. How scary is this racetrack, really?
Well, you can go out there and drive all by yourself, and it's not scary at all. But you get out there amongst all those cars, and I'll tell you, it takes a while to get used to that feeling. And riding, actually, where we were, we moved up to a comfortable spot and up with the lead cars, and that's where we just tried to ride there and, save the car for the end of the race. But like I say, we'll just come back next time and try it again.
Who's looking very strong to you right now, Jeff?
Well, I think there's about 20 cars up front that are looking pretty strong. It's really hard to pick one out because I believe everyone's just sort of riding where they are right now, trying to save their equipment for the end. And it's really hard to say who's the strongest right now.
How much can you really cool it if you're trying to slow down a little bit and save your equipment?
Well, you can cool it quite a lot. Back in that draft, you let off the throttle going into the corner, and that lets the engine breathe, and then coming off the corner, you stand back into it and let off going to the next corner. So it really helps the engine when you can do that.
Jeff Bodine looking for the Rookie of the Year award. He's out of it here at Talladega.
Well, Jeff mentioned the word scary when referring to driving this tremendous racetrack, 2.66 miles in length, 33-degree banks. We ask another race driver, Tim Richmond, about the danger of driving here at Talladega.
Well, not really. It's not. I mean, you can't let it get on your mind. If you do, you forget about other things. But you got to respect the racetrack. To me, it is easy to forget how fast you are going and how dangerous this place really is. You're not working quite that hard out there. You're going fast and you're trying to keep the same line and things of that nature. But you can forget how fast you're going. And there's one thing you don't want to do here, and that's get sideways or backwards or upside down or something, because the speed yard traveling here. This is the fastest racetrack in the world.
Tim Richmond is 2 laps down to the leader. His performance so far this year, he finished 31st at Rockingham, 5th at Darlington, 11th at North Wilkesboro, and 18th at Martinsville. And of course, Tim has only had this ride for the last couple of races. We still have the track crews out there putting down some oil dry compound because of the blown engine that we just had. So we are still under caution. The track crews, though, are beginning to move back into position, but we will be under yellow for a couple of more laps. 57,000 people here in the main grandstand, 14,000 on the backstretch grandstand, a total of 71 plus several thousand in the pit area. Tremendous crowd on hand here at Talladega this afternoon. We go down to Travis Carter, the crew chief on the Harry Gant car with Dick Bergeron.
Travis, the Skull Bandit, how's it running for you today?
Well, we seem to be running pretty well. I don't think we can't run quite as quick as Darrell and Benny. They're just playing cat and mouse right now, but we're still in the race, and if things go well, we'll have a good chance at the end, I think.
What's your game plan?
Well, the plan is to run just like he's running. He's running pretty conservative, and try not to abuse the car, just run what he has to stay up front, and wait for those last few laps or the last pit stop, and try to carry everything as good a shape as possible.
You say you're not running as well as some of the faster cars. Do you need more engine? Are you having a chassis problem? What is it?
Well, we made some adjustment on the handling before the last stop, and that seems to help, and perhaps we might get the handle on the handling a little better than the rest, and that might work to our advantage today.
Okay, there's Travis Carter.
And we are anticipating a green flag this time around. The pace car has turned off its lights and moved into pit road. And as the cars enter the tri-oval, the green flag is thrown. We are back to racing on lap number 66. Dale Earnhardt and Terry Labonte, or make that Tim Richmond and Terry Labonte running side by side down the tri-oval here, and Terry Labonte going to the high side of the racetrack is the leader. Darrell Waltrip second, and Dale Earnhardt is third. That number 75 car again is Joe RUTTMAN. He's off the lead lap. And Dave Marcus is spinning. Marcus is spinning on turn number 2, striking the wall and sliding down the backstretch. And Dave Marcus has caused another caution period here. That car coming to a rest finally up against the outside retaining wall. Dave Marcus, who was the winner of our race that we televised live for you from Richmond, Virginia, has spun and struck the outside retaining wall in turn number 2. Meanwhile, the race to the start-finish line continues, and here it is, and it's going to be Terry Labonte crossing the finish line first and the leader. Now we go back to survey the situation involving Dave Marcus.
Well, the significance of that race to the line as we look at Dave Marcus's car sitting along the backstretch retaining wall on the outside. There's Dave's car out of control. You can see smoke coming from underneath the race car, apparently something breaking. He almost saves it, but believe me, that's quite a thrill. He was going about 200 miles per hour when the car first started to get out from underneath him. Finally, he loses control, it breaks loose, skids up to the outer retaining wall, hitting it first with the front end of the car, and then slamming around. At this point now, Dave perhaps has no control of the machine. Sometimes the drivers are in a position where they can hold onto this race car and keep it up against the wall, but because that car went in headlong, probably this front end was damaged enough so that the steering was simply non-existent. Fortunately for Dave, as well as the other drivers behind him, he was able to keep that car up against the wall. Now, Ricky Rudd, who qualified so well here this week, Ricky Rudd was the 3rd fastest qualifier in the Piedmont Airlines Pontiac, got involved in that altercation. He was trailing Dave Marcus, and in all the confusion that went on behind, there were a couple of cars that banged bumpers, and Ricky went into a spin. He also touched the outer retaining wall at the right rear of the race car.
And a couple of drivers who did an excellent job avoiding that melee was Donnie Allison and Bill Elliott, who were to the inside of Marcus as he was doing all that spinning. But unfortunately, Ricky Rudd damaged his car in the right rear, and Rudd moving slowly down the backstretch. Obviously will be able to continue, but has definitely some damage to that automobile.
Well, Rudd is one of the younger drivers on the trail, as many of the leaders, including Richard Petty, have taken yet another opportunity to duck in, but Richard's doing more than a duck. He is getting a complete overhaul job, so to speak, on all those parts that are readily interchangeable on a race car, primarily the tire and the rubber, and of course topping off the fuel tank. Apparently Richard simply was not happy with the performance of the set of rubber that he had on the car during that brief green flag period, and they've taken an opportunity to make an additional stop to try another combination, another change in terms of the combination of the tires, stagger, what have you, on this race car.
So the King Richard Petty has moved back out onto the pit area, and Ricky Rudd now moves into the pit area. Look at the tremendous damage there on the right rear of that race car. We will wait and see what kind of adjustments the crew can make on that car. He slides to a halt, and they do go to work on it, changing the rubber, but they're also bringing out the sledgehammers and other equipment to try to get the sheet metal and the other debris away from the rear tire. You can see them pounding away on the right rear of that race car.
The crew chief on this team is Kirk Shelmerdine, himself a race driver, although he has pretty much retired. He was an international sedans driver in the NASCAR circuit for quite a number of years, and he's turned most of his attention to being a crew chief. This, of course, is the Richard Childress car. Now, there's the number 24 car, which Lenny Pond was driving here today, who also was involved in this crash.
So Dave Marcus and Lenny Pond have been eliminated in this accident. Ricky Rudd also involved in it, but apparently is going to get back into the competition. We have completed 69 laps. Terry Labonte, Bobby Allison, and Dale Earnhardt are the first 3 positions at this time. Bob Jenkins, Larry Nuber, and Dick Berggren back at Talladega. The car of Dave Marcus is being pulled off of the racetrack. Lenny Pond's car is also being pulled off of the racetrack. By the way, Lenny Pond won his only Grand National race right here on this racetrack. Larry Nuber had an opportunity to talk with Lenny earlier.
Lenny, has Grand National stock car racing been fair to you?
Well, I don't think it's exactly been fair in every case. But I like to think of it as been a lot of ups and downs, and I guess in my career in Grand National racing, I'd have to say it's been down more than it's been up. And, it's sort of difficult sometimes to come back and want to try to do your best when you know you don't really have a chance.
I would imagine that this racetrack, among all of them on the trail, probably makes you think more than any other. This is where you have your only Grand National win, and it came in one of the league's top cars.
Well, it was, it's a supercar, and I think the cars that Rene has owned, that's who I was driving for, has sat on the pole here lots of times. And the Daytona, it's one Daytona race, it's one race this here. I think it's one race this here by 3 different drivers. I won one, and Baker won one or 2, and Bob Allison won some for him. The cars are really tough cars here.
What happened? You won here and then you were fired shortly thereafter.
Well, there was something that had been building up the whole season. There was a lot of tension within the team, and I was a victim that ended up losing first. But it did give me a great chance to run good for that season, and we ran a lot of good races, and we only won one, but we run up front every week just about, and it was a good experience for me. Of course, since then things have been sort of down, and it's very hard for me to come back in and really want to get out there and run.
You say it's hard for you to want to get up and run?
When I know I don't have equipment to run up front.
Lenny, what is the difference between a frontline car and a car that you will struggle with to get in the field?
Well, the difference is money. The top cars has got either big sponsors or somebody that's got a lot of money that owns them, or either both. And in the situation I'm in now with Cecil, with his car, he's got a real nice race car, but we're just short of horsepower and short of dollars. It's Cupid dollars, that's the whole thing.
20 cars are on the lead lap. 20 cars on the lead lap, still under a caution flag. Richard Childress, the crew chief on the Ricky Rudd car, is with Dick Berggren.
Damaged is the car mechanically?
It's pretty bad. It knocked the whole rear end, the fuel cell and everything up over the rear end. We're going to try it under a green flag situation. If it don't work, we'll have to park the car, but it bent the rear end, the whole back of it. He said somebody drove into the back of it.
How about aerodynamically? Is this going to really foul the thing up?
Yeah, it's the rear end setting off center about 2 inches. I don't believe he'll be able to drive it.
Richard Childress, crew chief for Ricky Rudd.
All right, there is Rudd on the racetrack now, catching up with the rest of the field. The pace car stays out. Several other cars have come in for a stop, but Terry Labonte continues to be the leader with Bobby Allison second. Dale Earnhardt is running third. Darrell Waltrip is running in 4th position. Well, we have completed 71 laps. That means that we have 117 to go in the Winston 500. We'll be back in just a moment. This is the reason for the most recent caution flag. Dave Marcus in trouble in turn number 2.
Well, Bob, what happens at this racetrack, because you're going so fast, not only do you have to recover once, but oftentimes 2, 3, and even 4 times you have to make a recovery in terms of the movement that you're on the steering wheel when you get into trouble. They're covering about a football field or more a second. Things happen so very quickly, and it was obvious that there was something that went awry in the race car for Dave Marcus, and he gave it the best shot he could. There's a veteran race driver, Marcus, as we watch it. Ricky Rudd, another of the competitors involved in that crash. Marcus is a veteran race driver, and he did all he could to save it, but the car was just too far gone whatever it was that knocked it out of control in the very first place.
Well, you can see there's a little bit of hesitation there in the Ricky Rudd pit as they decide whether or not Rudd is going to get back in competition. Richard Childress indicating that the damage is too severe. They're going to park the car. Neil Bonnet in the number 21 Hodgson Ford, also with a little bit of damage perhaps on that race car. This isn't a place that you can trade paint as you can do on a smaller track.
No, it sure isn't, and Neil was running in that pack, and as a matter of fact, when I saw the second car from our vantage point, we're almost a mile away from the turn 2 where that took place. I thought that I had seen Neil spin and perhaps him also make contact with the retaining wall. I'm not absolutely certain, but it is very possible that Bonnet also spun out. He was in that pack. Neil, of course, running with the Ford. The Fords in a place like this, they find it better for their race plans to spend most of the first 3/4 of the race drafting some of the General Motors products that perhaps get around just a little quicker on a more consistent basis. But Neil is the kind of guy who's going to be around at the finish, and he'll be right in it for victory. He's a very crafty guy, particularly coming down those last 2 or 3 laps. If he's in the lead pack, he's somebody that everybody else is going to fear.
Ricky Rudd has moved back on the racetrack, so he is back in competition. We'll watch the pace car as it comes through the tri-oval to see if it ducks into pit road and whether or not we'll be going back to green here. Pace car does move off the racetrack. The green comes out and we're back to racing on lap number 73. Again, Buddy Baker in that Uno car is leading coming down here, but he is a lap down. Right behind him, Tim Richmond also a lap down. The leader of this race is the 3rd car in the picture. That is Terry Labonte in the number 44 Stacy Buick. Terry Labonte running first. Bobby Allison running in 2nd position. Here they are down off of the banking, down the backstretch. We'll see if Labonte can make a move on these 2 slower cars. Actually, they're not running much slower on the racetrack, but they are not on the lead lap. Labonte content to stay behind Richmond and Buddy Baker there in turn number 3 and 4.
Well, Bob, we've had Buddy Baker, Tim Richmond, and Joe Ruttman, who's in that light blue car that was just in your screen for a brief flicker of a second there, who are all cars that are down anywhere from 1 to 4 laps, who have been running in this lead draft for about the last 30 laps. Now, the reason why they stay there is that every time there's a caution flag, they hope to win the race back to the stripe, which Joe Ruttman did the last time, and thereby pick up another lap. They have not given up on their chances for victory, though, although at this point it looks bleak because we have almost 20 cars still on the lead lap. And it's pretty unlikely that all 20 of those cars are going to have misfortune in the next 110 laps or so, what's left in this race.
Well, Bobby Allison has passed Terry Labonte. Now Benny Parsons passes Bobby Allison, and Benny Parsons momentarily moves in the lead in turns 3 and 4. Labonte dropping back to 3rd position, and Dale Earnhardt running 4th. A great battle down the tri-oval here between Benny Parsons and Darrell Waltrip. This looks like the start of the race, Larry. That's the way those 2 cars were when the green flag dropped, and by golly, they haven't gotten away from each other so far today. Richard Petty, meanwhile, also moving up nicely on the inside of the racetrack. So it is Benny Parsons now the leader with Bobby Allison 2nd. It is Darrell Waltrip 3rd and Terry Labonte 4th.
You know, it's a shame that they don't give an award for the number of laps that you lead the lead draft across the start-finish line. I think Buddy Baker would win that award, and he's doing all this work, and he's not even getting credit for leading the race. A 10-car draft up front. Benny Parsons once again asserts himself. He moves underneath Buddy Baker, putting effectively another lap on Buddy, although Buddy tacks right in on the rear deck of Benny Parsons' race car, the Waddell Wilson wrench machine, as they come through the tri-oval for yet another time.
And Benny Parsons continues to lead as we go back down to the pit area. Dick Berggren.
Ricky Rudd's crew just took off out of here carrying the toolbox on a full run for the garage area. Ricky Rudd is heading there where they're going to attempt to get this car back together again. They're going to have to replace what's known as the rear control arm. That's the arm that keeps the rear end in the car. That's how badly damaged it is. They're going to try to change that and get Ricky Rudd back on the racetrack.
Dale Earnhardt is moving once again. We saw Earnhardt go to the high side of the racetrack just a half a lap ago to pass by Tim Richmond, and Earnhardt now moves into second position. Dale Earnhardt in that number 15 Wrangler Jeans Ford is in second position, and certainly in a challenging position to the leader, Benny Parsons. Here is a completion of lap number 77. Terry Labonte still runs in third place with Darrell Waltrip running fourth.
Well, if you're not intimately familiar with Grand National Racing, you probably noticed the similarity in the paint jobs between Dale Earnhardt's car, the blue and yellow number 15 car, as well as Tim Richmond's, as we go back and look at Bobby Allison in the Gatorade number 88 and the Dew Crew car, the number 11 car of Darrell Waltrip. That's because the paint job on Richmond's car, right there, the number 2 car, is the legacy left over from when Dale Earnhardt used to be the driver of this team, now the J.D. Stacy team for whom Richmond drives.
Well, I think we have definitely answered the question as to whether or not Bobby Allison would be able to run at race speeds because of that incident earlier today in the pit area in which he nearly tore the front bumper off of that car. Bobby Allison has definitely moved up into the contention of this race and running strong to the high side of the racetrack in turn number 1. Running there with the Darrell Waltrip. Right ahead of them is the Tim Richmond car, but Richmond is at least 1 lap down. Down the backstretch, still showing the leader as Benny Parsons.
You know, Bob, that's a very interesting group of cars, needless to say, every time you go to the front pack. There's Kyle Petty, who is in that group, right behind Bobby Allison. Petty right now, Kyle that is, on the outside of Darrell Waltrip. Also running in that pack is Mark Martin, who's been with it all day long. The number 98 car of Morgan Shepherd. Now, Morgan qualified in the middle of the pack at 16th in the Levi Garrett Buick. Buddy Parrott, the crew chief there. And Morgan, there in that yellow trimmed white machine, though he looks like he's in the tail of the lead pack, he's been there all day long. A couple of interesting stories. Mark Martin and Morgan Shepherd continuing to run in the top 10. They've never been lost.
And the cars move through turn number 2 now down the backstretch. Harry Gant, you'll notice, is working to the inside of the racetrack here as Mark Martin, the driver that you were just talking about, is battling there with Morgan Shepherd in turn 3.
Well, Mark Martin and Shepherd, of course, have been with each other all day long. Mark, a 3-time ASA champion. You know, Bob, I talked to him earlier in the week down in the pit area, and I said, you know, Mark, a lot of people have watched you for a long time, felt that you might make a big splash in Grand National Racing, and maybe you would have won a race, say, by mid-season. What's going on? He turned, looked, and smiled and said, it's not mid-season yet.
18 cars are on the lead lap. 18 cars on the lead lap. Buddy Baker, who right now is running third in that draft of cars, but not on the lead lap, has won 4 times here at Talladega. David Pearson has won 3 times. Bobby Allison and Donnie Allison both have won 3 times, and Darrell Waltrip has won twice. Here is Kyle Petty, the 21-year-old driver from Randleman, North Carolina, 2nd generation, actually a 3rd generation driver, who is running strong here right behind Darrell Waltrip.
You know, you look at the graphic, 21 years of age, it seems like he should be about 25 already. He's a standard fixture, and it seems like he's been around for several years. But Bob, as you pointed out, this is only his 3rd year as a driver. It's only the 2nd year for his crew chief, Mike Beam, a young man who was involved in late model sportsman racing for quite a number of years. And when Butch Lindley drove for Mike Beam, Kyle Petty's crew chief, Butch won over 140 races. A lot of people were surprised that the Pettys hired Mike Beam. There's Darrell Waltrip testing the inside of Tim Richmond. Again, Richmond down several laps. Harry Gant in the Skull Bandit following Waltrip by, and they go underneath Kyle Petty. So we're still going wheel to wheel, fender to fender at better than 200 miles per hour on the world's fastest racetrack.
Kyle Petty running in 7th position. Daddy Richard is running in 13th position, but we have word that Richard Petty may be slowing down on the racetrack. Indeed, that is the situation. Richard Petty was running 13th, but obviously has a problem with that car. After yesterday's practice period here at Talladega, there was great concern in the Petty pit and the garage area because that car was not performing up to snuff in the practice yesterday, and obviously it has not performed well today.
Bob, they were having fuel pickup problems all week long. They didn't know what it was, if it was a fuel pump, a fuel filter, or the fuel pickup device itself, but they have been putting a lot of extra hours in that car, and apparently they don't have them solved yet. This racetrack has not been particularly kind to the king of stock car racing, Richard Petty.
We'll return with more live coverage of the Winston 500 from Talladega, Alabama in a moment. Benny Parsons is the leader, Earnhardt second, and Terry Labonte third. Richard Petty is in the pit area under green and some serious trouble. Larry, they are working at the rear of that race car near the fuel tank, indicating possibly more fuel pickup problems as he experienced yesterday.
Yeah, it would certainly indicate that, and they're prepared with quite a number of tools. And I think Dick Bergman is right down on the scene. Dick Bergman in pit row.
They're right now working on the gas tank in Richard Petty's car. That has been the problem all week, is a fuel pickup problem. Morris Petty is there, fuel just straight out of the gas tank. Things are definitely not going well in the Petty pit at this moment.
So tough luck for Richard Petty, who so far this year has finished 27th at Daytona, 2nd at Richmond, 7th at Bristol, 2nd at Atlanta, 30th at Rockingham, 31st at Darlington, 5th at North Wilkesboro, and 15th at Martinsville. The leader is Benny Parsons. Second place is Dale Earnhardt as they flash down the backstretch, and also doing testing each other out there on the racetrack. Bill Elliott in number 9, the Melling Tool Ford, and Donnie Allison not running too far from Bill.
Well, Elliott's been in the lead pack. He sat on the pole in a super speedway. He's never won a Grand National race, but he's in it for possible victory today.
Back to the leaders, and we check on the progress of what's going on there with Benny Parsons and Earnhardt as we see Darrell Waltrip move to the inside of Earnhardt and try to move into second position. Also in that 4-car lead draft is Terry Labonte. They head toward turn number 2 on the 33-degree banking. Meanwhile, here is the best race on the course right now. This is Darrell Waltrip and Harry Gant, the 2 green and white cars running side by side with Kyle Petty right there also.
Well, that's 5th, 6th, 7th in the lap car of Buddy Baker as they scream down the 4,000-foot backstretch. It's relatively flat compared to the 33-degree banking. Gant running down on the bottom of the racetrack opens up surprisingly about 3 car lengths over Darrell as Darrell allowed Kyle Petty to duck down in line as they come through the south turns 3 and 4, now into the tri-oval. The Skull Bandit leads this group of cars at least. This lap around, cross the start-finish stripe. It's Harry Bandit, that's a good one. Harry Gant running in 5th position as he crosses to complete lap number 87.
And Kyle Petty is running in 6th position. He has seen his father into the pit area. Last time around, Richard went back out on the racetrack, but now Richard Petty pulls into the pit area, and we watch down pit road and see that Richard Petty has put the car behind the wall. So Richard Petty is going to be out of this competition. His son Kyle continues to run out there in 6th position. There is Richard Petty pulling behind the pit wall and calling it a day in the Winston 500.
Well, Petty, as we commented, has not had the success at this racetrack that he's had at other speedways. He's only won once here at this track. Kyle Petty, you saw momentarily there in a slide, and Kyle Petty with a great recovery job coming down the front stretch through the tri-oval that time.
Kyle Petty running in 6th position. You can see he has dropped back a few car lengths because of that little slide there in the tri-oval area, but he'll get back on the accelerator as they go down the backstretch and try to catch up with Harry Gant, who is running in 5th position. The distance between Harry Gant in 5th and the 4th place car is almost a half a turn here, so Harry Gant could not be considered in the lead draft, but certainly is in a challenging position. The first 4 cars that are running nose to tail and side by side on the racetrack: Benny Parsons, Dale Earnhardt, Darrell Waltrip, rather Bobby Allison, and Terry Labonte.
Well, you know, we were looking at Gant a couple of minutes ago. You certainly can't count him out. There's Benny Parsons, who continues to dominate this race, and you know, I go along with Travis Carter. I don't know if it's cat and mouse, but boy, Benny really looks strong. Harry Gant, who won last week for the first time after all those second-place finishes, there were a lot of people who thought it might open the floodgates. They've been so close so many times to victory that Harry Gant might start winning a lot as soon as they were able to just sneak in that first win. They did it last week, so a lot of people are also watching Harry Gant here at Talladega this weekend.
Number 70 car of J.D. McDuffie, the Max Stores Pontiac, being lapped by the leaders as they come into the tri-oval area, about to complete lap number 90. We are almost halfway through this event. Now Bobby Allison is running in second position, having moved around Dale Earnhardt. Allison running second, Earnhardt third, and Terry Labonte is fourth. But Harry Gant has moved up right on the back of the Terry Labonte car, so we have seen that advantage that Labonte had over the fifth place Harry Gant diminish here in the past few laps, and a battle shaping up for fourth in the next few laps. Benny Parsons and Bobby Allison going at it door handle to door handle down the backstretch, and Bobby Allison wants the lead in the 88 Gatorade Buick. Bobby Allison leads at this point, and he has recovered well from those injuries suffered to the car in the pit area.
I mean, that's the first time we've seen Bobby Allison express himself in quite some time, and I think a couple of things were on his mind, Bob. That first of all, he wanted to show everybody that the car aerodynamically is sound. You know, the other drivers are aware of what happened with the bumper. They saw it during the caution flag, and Bobby's just saying, look guys, you can run with me, everything is fine, and I can run just as quick with you. Something else that Bobby did is the crowd begins to rise the occasion as two of the favorites, Earnhardt and Allison, are side by side. Allison was going through slow, and look at Harry Gant, like out of a cannon from nowhere. Harry Gant.
And Kyle Petty also. That's the slingshot effect that you can get on the backstretch going into the turn. Gant and Petty both going around Allison and Earnhardt and moving into first and second position. A great move there by those two drivers in the backstretch. Harry Gant now the leader, and Kyle Petty is second.
Well, Bob, I think what happened there is that Allison and Earnhardt were so concerned with each other running side by side going down the backstretch. That slows you down in the drafting situation. You lose up to 10 miles an hour, and Gant and Kyle, they were aware of it. They hooked up in a freight train draft and went right by on the inside.
Well, that's why the speeds in this race were expected to be higher than the qualifying speeds, because you can run faster in a drafting situation than you can all alone on the racetrack. Look at this nose-to-tail Grand National racing. From Talladega, Alabama, Harry Gant, Kyle Petty, and Dale Earnhardt are showing the way here. Earnhardt moving to the high side of Kyle Petty as they enter the tri-oval, but Bobby Allison is also right there behind Earnhardt. Here they come. We'll see how they cross the start-finish line to score lap number 93. One more lap, and we'll be exactly halfway through this race. Harry Gant was the leader of that lap, with Earnhardt running second position, but now those two are side by side in turns 1 and 2.
Bob, you know, if you watch Kyle Petty closely, he is not perfectly comfortable in the car. He's running quick. He's obviously got enough horses to stay with the lead draft, but every once in a while you see a little more wiggling in Kyle's situation than the other front runners. And the last time that Benny Parsons went around Kyle, he too had been observing that. I saw him give him extra room. And the Petty crew may be thinking right now, what are they going to do to make that car just a little more stable underneath Kyle during the next period of pit stops?
Kyle Petty running strong on the racetrack. Just a few laps ago, Richard Petty dropped out of competition. We are halfway through the Talladega Winston 500. Halfway, 94 laps complete. It is a three-car battle between Bobby Allison, Harry Gant, and Dale Earnhardt. We will be right back. And our sources tell us that the car driven by Mark Martin perhaps has a problem with the windshield. We will be waiting to see whether or not Mark comes into the pit area, but we did have word that perhaps the windshield on that car is caving in. At any rate, the green flag stays out, and this is how they're running. Benny Parsons, Bobby Allison, Harry Gant, and Kyle Petty. Here is Dale Earnhardt into the pit area. Dale Earnhardt sliding to a stop, the crew going to work. Dale was running in second position, but now has chosen this opportunity to get back into the pit area for another stop. We have the clock on him. We'll see how long it takes that Wrangler crew to get him back into competition, and there he goes, and the pit stop was 17.9 seconds, and he is laying rubber getting out of the pit area.
Well, Bob, we were getting close to the time when it would have been appropriate to pit, but Earnhardt did catch me a little by surprise. He's in earlier than I expected, but let's see how it works for him. Keep in mind now, the other leaders in the lead draft are about 3/4 of a lap ahead of Dale, but obviously they'll have to come in soon. Or also, Dale's counting on the fact that they too have to pit under the green flag.
And the leader is Benny Parsons. Right behind him is Bobby Allison. Those two cars have moved out ahead of the third place car, Kyle Petty. So quite a distance between the second and third place car right now, with Parsons shown as the leader. And we have completed more than half of this race, and we settle back now to see what happens in the second half. The first half marked by two accidents, one involving David Simcoe near the start of the race, David okay. The other accident involved a couple of cars, Lenny Pond and Dave Marcus, also Ricky Rudd suffering some damage to that car. No driver injuries. It's been a tremendous race to this point, and this car and this driver have dominated the event so far, Benny Parsons. And more pit stops are being made. Here is Kyle Petty, who is running third in for service.
Well, Kyle has had a great day up to this point. The crew bolts the wall, headed by Mike Beam again, as they give complete service to Kyle. Kyle is now the remaining force in the Petty stable. Father Richard has dropped out of this race prematurely. It looks to be a very routine pit stop, and Kyle Petty in the legendary number 42. His number normally would have been 44. The first couple of races he drove as a professional driver in the ARCA circuit, he ran 44, continuing the tradition of Lee Petty, the grandfather, driving 42, Richard 43. Kyle would have been 44, but Terry Labonte already had the number by the time Kyle got up to NASCAR.
We mentioned the possible problem with Mark Martin. Here's more on that from Dick.
Okay, 1, 2, 3. They've got a problem with the camera of some kind. They're changing.
And a problem down there in the pit area, but we'll get right back to Dick in a few moments with a report on that situation involving Mark Martin. Here are the two leaders, and we'll be watching to see now if they come in for a pit stop this time around or whether they stay out there and continue in competition. Benny Parsons and Bobby Allison running together on the racetrack have separated themselves pretty much from the third place car, but both of these drivers need a pit stop.
Bob, they're also closing in on Dale Earnhardt. Now, this could be a significant moment in this race if these two drivers put a lap on Dale Earnhardt and then the caution flag comes out. Earnhardt could end up going a lap down. Now, Parsons and Allison, as they go by you, they're running quicker than Earnhardt because they're hooked up in a draft. There's Dale Earnhardt as he moves into the screen right now. He's got to have white knuckles, and the perspiration has got to be gathering on his forehead. He does not want to lose a lap to these two guys before they come in for the pit stop. But I'll tell you, they're gobbling them up, and here they come.
In third position is Darrell Waltrip as we watch Neil Bonnet and Tim Richmond out there on the racetrack, and those two, it looked like, got together there for a moment. Tim Richmond moving to the inside of Bonnet in turn number 3, but Richmond falling off of the pace just a little bit. 100 laps completed. Benny Parsons, Bobby Allison, Darrell Waltrip, Terry Labonte. In 5th position is Donnie Allison. Running in 6th is Neil Bonnet. 7th is Mark Martin. 8th is Morgan Shepherd. And running in 9th position would be Bill Elliott.
Well, there's Tim Richmond on your screen with Morgan Shepherd. Now down to the pit area. There's the windshield we were referring to earlier on the young Batesville, Arkansas. Originally, that was the hometown of Mark Martin. He spent some years in Indiana when he was running on the ASA circuit. He now has moved to the south, where he can remain active, of course, on the Grand National Stock Car Trail. The Apache Stoves Buick Mark Martin, who qualified at better than 195 miles per hour. Let's see how fast this crew can change the front windshield on a race car. The crew is headed up by Mark's father, Julian, who has been with Mark the entirety of his career. They started out about 6 years ago on the dirt tracks back home in Arkansas. And it's really a difficult break for Mark Martin, who was running with the leaders all day. Some of the leaders now coming into the pits,
including Darrell Waltrip. By the way, those two leaders, Parsons and Bobby Allison, have lapped Dale Earnhardt, but remember, the two lead cars need a pit stop. The third place car of Darrell Waltrip getting a pit stop right now as the crew changes rubber on the right side of the car, fills it with fuel, and back out goes Darrell Waltrip in 14.9 seconds. 14.9. Isn't this rather unusual? Have you ever seen this being done?
Yeah, I have, Bob. It is different, let's say that, but it's really not all that uncommon for this to occur. Dick Bergman has got a further report on the windshield change down in the pits.
One of the fellows that's working ever so hard on this windshield is a fellow named Steve Peterson, and Steve has been with Mark Martin on all his short track races for the last couple of years. He's the man who was on your screen taking the windshield off the car.
And here are the two leaders in the pits. Benny Parsons at the top of your screen and Bobby Allison on the bottom. The crew's changing rubber. Benny Parsons is out, and so is Bobby Allison. So those two with just about the same length of time in the pit area, and they pull out with Bobby Allison having pitted further down pit road with the advantage, but both of those cars pulling out quickly. Harry Gant, meanwhile, also in. Terry Labonte moves out of the pit area. Harry Gant's crew is still working, and they have the hood up on that car.
Well, I think they might have been making a chassis adjustment. We heard from Travis Carter earlier in the day. They felt that their advantage would be in the setup of the car, not in the engine compartment. They have been communicating throughout the last 40 or 50 laps about what would be the best setup, and I think that's probably what they conducted there during that pit stop, Bob.
All of this pit activity is being taken under the green flag. We have not had any yellows in the past few minutes. Look at Donnie Allison, and it looks like they're also having a problem with his windshield. They're going to replace Donnie Allison.
Well, keep in mind, we had a couple of crashes earlier in this race, plus also remember that lead freight train was almost 20 cars long for the first 100 miles of this race, and when you're running in those close of quarters, there's a lot of debris, there's a lot of bits and pieces of rubber that fly up when you're in a big pack like that, and because so many of those cars were so close for so long, the windshields probably got battered with debris. Allison and Martin were two of those, running about 15th through 20th.
The windshields of Mark Barton and Donnie Allison are being changed. We're going to change gears here for just a minute and take this break and be right back. With 82 laps to go, Benny Parsons is the leader, Bobby Allison second, and Terry Labonte is third in the Winston 500. In the last few laps, we have seen two windshields change for the race cars. Let's get more on that from Dick Bergeron.
This is Donnie Allison's windshield, or really what's left of Donnie Allison's windshield, and we're looking at the driver's side of the windshield, as a matter of fact. Obviously, it would be extremely difficult to be able to see out of this. That's the reason both Mark Barton and Donnie Allison came in to change them. What would break a windshield like this? At 200 miles an hour, almost anything. A bird could do this to a windshield. An engine part kicked off from an engine that had blown earlier in the day. Possibly a rock kicked up out of the infield could do that kind of a damage to a windshield. Each of these windshields have 3 heavy steel bars behind them to prevent the whole windshield from coming in and collapsing on the driver. And in addition, these are safety plate glass windshields. So it's all done in the interest of safety. Nevertheless, imagine trying to drive at 200 miles an hour looking at a disaster like that.
Thank you, Dick. Good report. Let's pick up some action here on the racetrack. Buddy Baker is leading this contingent, and also in that battle is Neil Bonnet, and to the inside, Donnie Allison. Here they come through the tri-oval. We'll be watching this race on the track. The yellow and white car is Dale Earnhardt, who has been dropping back several positions in the last few laps, Larry.
Yeah, he's dropped back. He's managed to stay on the lead lap with the leaders, showing the way Benny Parsons and Donnie Allison. But Earnhardt doesn't appear to be as quick as he was earlier in the day. Earnhardt running down in the 7th position at this point in the race. Remember, Buddy Baker lost several laps very early on, and he's been struggling to make those up, but has been unsuccessful in doing so. And you know, Bob, about a lap ago, I still see the dust coming from underneath Dale Earnhardt's car. He continues to move the groove that he himself, his personal racing line, is using up higher and higher. Oh, trouble in the tri-oval. Buddy Baker coming together with, it appeared to be Donnie Allison. It was not Allison, it was another white car. Just as we were on him, Baker, fortunately for him, spinning near the pit area. Now he'll try to nurse that car back to his pit stall there along the pit row. Buddy Baker in the Uno car, crashing here on the tri-oval.
Can you believe the job of driving, not only by Buddy Baker, who managed to do a complete spin and keep the car going, but by Dale Earnhardt and the others who were right there when Baker lost control. There is damage, you can see, to the front end of Dale Earnhardt's car. Buddy Baker did not make a stop in the pit area because we had no yellow, and we had no reason for a yellow because Baker's car came on into the pit area. So Baker stays out there, although there is damage to that car in the right front.
Well, Bob, there was a third car involved in that. It was a white car. At first I thought it might have been Donnie Allison, but it looks like perhaps Jimmy Means, I think, is the driver there right in front of Buddy. Jimmy moving up to the high lane, coming down through the tri-oval. Means and Buddy make contact ever so slightly and squeezes Buddy right behind his Dale Earnhardt, and Earnhardt does not have enough time to get on the brakes to prevent from touching the left rear panel of Buddy Baker's race car. Earnhardt pushing Buddy, who is slowing down suddenly in front of him, pushes Buddy around, nowhere for Dale to go. And Buddy standing on the brakes all the way around, fighting the steering wheel as the car comes around and starts to point in the right direction. Now you tromp on the accelerator. It gives you control of the machine again. And Bob, you're right. That was one fine piece of work.
I tell you, and also by Dale Earnhardt and by Neil Bonnet, who was right behind Earnhardt. It was a tremendous job of driving. Meanwhile, a part off of the car has been spotted by our cameraman lying in the grassy area of the racetrack. This has been a tremendous race, and a lot of things have happened here in the first two-thirds of it.
Well, we continued under green because of the expertise of these Grand National stock car drivers. Buddy and Earnhardt, of course, both hoped that the yellow flag would come out. There are the pieces flying off of Earnhardt's car as he leaves the tri-oval area and heads for the 33-degree banking in turn number 1. Real tough break for Earnhardt, who had run up front all day long, and we saw him running that spectacular line. There's Donnie Allison moving underneath Earnhardt. Donnie has been behind Dale since the incident a couple of laps ago. I have a feeling we may see Earnhardt coming in, although he certainly doesn't give any indication of it at this point.
No, as a matter of fact, he's staying right up there on the high racing groove that he has been using most of the afternoon. And although there is damage to the front end of that car, Earnhardt stays on the button. Well, let's review our leaders at this point with 115 laps completed. Benny Parsons, the leader. Bobby Allison is second. Terry Labonte running in third position. Darrell Waltrip is fourth. Running in fifth is Kyle Petty. Sixth is Morgan Shepherd. Seventh was Dale Earnhardt. And eighth, Neil Bonnet. And we will have more coverage of the Winston 500 after we take this break. We have 115 laps completed. Back at Talladega, while we were away, these two drivers traded positions, but they're back now in the order they were running before we went away for commercial. Benny Parsons leading and Bobby Allison running in second position. Ricky Rudd suffered damage to his car a little bit earlier in the day as he suffered some damage to the right rear of that car. He came in the pit area, pulled behind the wall, work was done to it, and now Ricky Rudd is back out there in competition in the Piedmont Airlines Pontiac.
Meanwhile, of course, Buddy Baker and the Haas Ellington crew, they have been working feverishly while we've been away. The rest of the field out rocket shipping around this 2.66-mile racetrack at race speed, and Haas and the gang is trying to get the Uno car repaired so that Buddy can go back out on the speedway. Buddy Baker, as you saw on the screen a few moments ago, simply got caught behind slower traffic, and there wasn't enough room on the racetrack for him.
But it's not enough to keep Buddy Baker out of competition. He is back on the racetrack.
A few laps ago, when we passed the halfway point, a special award was given. They have gathered up $5,000 to give to the guy who leads the halfway point of the race, and Bobby Allison, who has not led all that number of laps in this race, was the guy who was heading the pack at the halfway point, so Bobby picked up the $5,000. But the main man to this point certainly appears to be the number 28, not the 88.
Well, a sponsor is very important to any race car, and Piedmont Airlines has been involved in racing throughout the season, sponsoring the Ricky Rudd car. We understand that about 600 employees and people invited by Piedmont Airlines are watching us this afternoon from Winston-Salem, North Carolina. We thank you for your support of auto racing, and we are very glad that you are watching our live coverage of the Winston 500 on ESPN. Here is Dick Berggren with Haas Ellington.
Haas Ellington, you're the car owner for Buddy Baker, the Uno car. What happened just now?
Well, we've had bad luck all day. The first time we got in there, we had a tire equalized. We took us 2 laps to find out what that was on that deal. Then we got hit in the pits by another car, and that cost us another pit stop. And then fifth car, 52, running us in the wall. So it just ain't been our day. That's all I can say.
What kind of shape is the car in after all that?
Well, the front end's tore up and the back end's tore up. So we might go try to stay out there and just see what we can do. Right now we got a caution, so maybe we get a chance to work on it some more.
That's Haas Ellington, Buddy Baker's car owner.
And we do have a caution on the racetrack, and we believe it's because of some debris down in the turn 1 area, right, Larry?
Well, Bob, I was watching Dale Earnhardt a couple of laps ago come through the tri-oval, approach turn number 1, and more pieces of metal from that damaged front end I saw exiting the race car and flying up in the air, and some shiny parts tumbling down the front stretch here. And going down toward the infield area. So I'm pretty sure that we've got debris on the racetrack near the entry to turn number 1, and this should bring everybody home for refreshments.
I think you're absolutely right. We can see the first 2 cars at least coming in for service. Benny Parsons and Bobby Allison, also Darrell Waltrip and Ricky Rudd. There is Terry Labonte, Morgan Shepherd also into the pit area. We'll split our screen and watch the pit stops for the leaders. Benny Parsons on the top of your screen and Bobby Allison on the bottom.
Well, it takes a full crew of people, obviously, to service these cars in a brief period of time. Waddell Wilson, the crew chief, the jackman, Slick Poston on the number 28 car. The car on the top of your screen does his job. He's already had the right side up and down. Now the left side's back up. An important man in all of this operation is certainly the guy who refills the gas tank, and that's Richard Bostic on the Harry Renier team. As Benny Parsons pulls away, the J.D. Stacy name emblazoned boldly on the side, as Bobby Allison also pulls out those Terry Labonte. So apparently uneventful pit stops for all of our leaders, but then you never know. Sometimes the gas doesn't fill up, sometimes the right tire has not been pulled off the rack. You just never know in racing.
Well, we mentioned sponsorships, and we salute J.D. Stacy for placing 6 cars in this race here today. While the yellow is on, we'll take this break and be right back at Talladega. Back at Talladega with 121 laps completed. We have 67 to go in the Winston 500. Waddell Wilson prepared the pole sitter car, Benny Parsons, for this particular race. Parsons qualified at over 200 miles an hour, 200.176 to be exact. And we asked Benny Parsons about Waddell's secret.
Well, you know, his race cars historically have run awfully well at Daytona and Talladega. What it is probably the best known secret. You know, it's better than the Coca-Cola syrup probably, because no one knows but Waddell, and he ain't telling.
And that is about as succinct as you can put it.
And be rest assured, many, including some of his former and current drivers, have asked, Waddell, how you do that? And to quote Benny Parsons, he ain't telling. Waddell not only has wrenched many cars that have qualified quick here, but he also has the 2 most recent winners in the Winston 500 in 1980. Buddy Baker came home first, and in 1981, Bobby Allison was first under the checker flag, and Benny Parsons hopes to continue that string here today, going for 3 in a row for Waddell Wilson as a crew chief.
Well, Benny Parsons right now running in 2nd position behind Bobby Allison. Behind Benny Parsons is the 3rd place car of Terry Labonte. Running 4th at this time is Kyle Petty, and 5th is Neil Bonnet. We haven't talked much about Neil Bonnet today. He's just kind of settled back and not done too much, but is right up there in 5th position.
But it's been like a wrestling match for him. He's been battered around on a couple of occasions. We saw him touch bumpers with Tim Richmond earlier, where there are big tire marks on the side of the car.
Well, Darrell Waltrip has led most laps in 1982 Winston Cup races, 867. Dale Earnhardt has led 638. Bobby Allison 229. Harry Gant has led 208 laps, and Neil Bonnet 186.
It's particularly impressive for Bonnet because I think everybody is aware that normally Neil Bonnet doesn't run every race on the trail, although he has picked up a ride for the short tracks, if you want to call a mile or 5/8 of a mile track short, and he has had an opportunity to run every race so far in 1982.
It's a very warm day here, but a very pleasant day at Talladega, Alabama. You can see an airport located right behind the backstretch. Let's go down once again to Dick Berggren for this report.
Waddell Wilson, we all just heard Benny Parsons talking about how well you prepare this race car. What do you do to make this thing go so fast at Talladega?
Well, it's just all the guys that work for Near Racing, you know, just putting it all together and giving 100%. And, you know, we put a lot of extra hours in on this race car to come and perform like this. And, you know, the bad thing about it, when we don't do well and you know, when the car falls out, we all really feel bad. So we go back and just try double hard to come back and run strong and win the race.
What's your game plan from here?
Well, we're going to have to make one more stop, so is the rest of the cars, and hopefully we can run out front and be there at the end.
Do you think you're running fast enough that if you were running in a draft at the end, you'd be able to pass for the win?
Well, that's going to be hard to say. You know, it's going to depend on how the cars stack up, who's in front and who's behind us, and who'll go with us or who won't.
Waddell Wilson, the man that makes Benny Parsons go so fast.
7,000 people in front of us rise to their feet once again to watch the green flag come out, and Bobby Allison lead Benny Parsons down through the tri-oval into turn number 1 as we resume racing in the Winston 500. 123 laps have been completed. It's still anybody's race. There are the first 4 cars in the lead draft at this time. They are Bobby Allison, Benny Parsons, Terry Labonte, and Kyle Petty.
And Bob, for the first time, the first 7 or 8 cars, at least all of those cars were still on the same lap with the leader, Benny Parsons, are within, say, a half a football field of each other. Now, they're going to try and hook up and just stay with Benny Parsons. That's been something that's not been easy to do all day today, but for the first time in a long time, we've got a log jam near the top. You know, one of the guys who was hung right in there all day, we started to develop this story, is Neil Bonnet. Remember, that's a Ford that does very well in the draft. Neil Bonnet will be expected, or you can expect for him, to try and tuck in behind somebody else. Waddell Wilson was talking about who will go with us in the final lap. What he meant was that usually if there are a pack of cars, anything larger than 3 that are going after victory in the final lap, very seldom is it that one driver and car can do it alone. Somebody has to hook up with you in a 2-car freight train draft, pick a lane on the racetrack, and go toward the front. These drivers can actually signal each other with hand movements while they're at racing speed, but of course it's like a chess game. You never know if the guy is asking, he's just pulling your leg, or if he really wants you to go with it.
You can see that Terry Labonte has moved by Bobby Allison to go into 2nd position. I can't remember recently a more thrilling finish than the race here last fall, the Talladega 500, which, by the way, this year will be run on August 1st here at the world's fastest speedway. The Talladega 500 this year on August 1st. Last year, Ron Bouchard's victory. Boy, what a tremendous race.
Well, I think what added to the drama was the fact that everyone was watching Bouchard. They knew he was strong, but it was only like his 11th or 12th race ever in a Grand National car, and nobody figured that he would have had the moxie, the skill, and been able to think through that final lap to make the move. And I think that one of the reasons why it was so dramatic, it was such a surprise. I can't really say there are any real big surprises in this pack. Maybe Morgan Shepherd, the biggest surprise, the short track star, the white yellow trim number 98's the tail car on that tandem. You just saw it briefly. He's still on the lead lap. He's never been more than 3 or 4 seconds behind the leader. Another surprise, Kyle Petty, although remember, Kyle did run up front at Daytona until he had car problems.
All right, let's go back through the field now. Running in 5th position is Darrell Waltrip. In 6th is Neil Bonnet. In 7th position is Morgan Shepherd. 8th is Dale Earnhardt. Then a lap down in 9th position is Mark Martin. In 10th is Harry Gant, also a lap down. In 11th is Donnie Allison. Running in 12th position is Tim Richmond. 13th is Slick Johnson. And in 14th position would be Buddy Arrington. Let's get an overview of their most recent pit stop activity from our reporter down there, Dick Berggren. Dick?
Well, there's a real competition going on today in the pit area in that there are several teams that are trying to participate in a pit crew contest. The one that spends the least amount of time in the pits and yet finishes the race is going to wind up with $2,000. That amount of money goes directly to the crews, so you can best believe they're going to be highly motivated to do well here. Terry Labonte, J.C. Elder, the crew chief, has made 4 stops. They've been in for a total of 176 seconds. Benny Parsons, Waddell Wilson, crew chief, also 4 stops for 195.52. And Darrell Waltrip, chief by Junior Johnson, has been in for 4 stops at 184.20.
All right, Dick. And we go back to the racetrack to check on the progress of our first 3 cars. Benny Parsons, Terry Labonte, and Bobby Allison. Still running in 4th position is Kyle Petty. Great wheel-to-wheel and nose-to-tail racing here in the lead draft as we have completed 127 laps of the 188. We got 62 to go here in Talladega, Alabama. This is Bob Jenkins, Larry Newber, and Dick Berggren covering the activity for you here today. We'll take this break and be right back. Well, on Thursday, May 13th at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time and 5 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time, join us for Top Rank Boxing from Fort Worth, Texas. Sal Marciano and Al Bernstein will be there to cover a couple of fights for you, a 10-round junior lightweight battle and a 10-round bantamweight battle, and one of the fighters in that is Harold Petty from Fort Worth, Texas. So join us for Top Rank Boxing Thursday, May 13th at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 5:30 Pacific Time here on ESPN.
You know, Top Rank Boxing on ESPN, Bob, has been one of our more interesting series. We've been able to follow the careers of a lot of young fighters who have gone on to stardom.
And at the Winston 500, we are still under a green flag situation. And at the end of 130 laps, it is still Benny Parsons and Terry Labonte running 1 and 2. Running in third position at this time, Kyle Petty, who has gotten around Bobby Allison. Allison is fourth. Fifth position belongs to Darrell Waltrip. Waltrip has not challenged in the last several laps, Larry. Is there a reason for that, you think?
Yeah, I think it's their race plan. I think that Junior Johnson and Darrell Waltrip in the last 2 years have perhaps become the master strategist in NASCAR racing. There have been many races that Waltrip has gone on to victory in that he really hasn't shown the way. He hasn't blazed the trail. He stayed right where he is right now, but come the final 2 laps, he's also where he wants to be then, also up front.
The editor of Stock Car Racing magazine is doing some television work today for ESPN. Here is Dick Bergeron in the pit area.
Well, the last time we were in this particular pit area, Harry Gant's pit area, the driver was leading and it was a very happy pit crew. Right now, this crew is down. Their engine has lost a cylinder. They're running on 7. They're hardly able to keep up.
Let's check on the cars who have dropped out of the competition here in the Winston 500. Dave Simcoe was the first out because of an accident. Also out, L.W. Wright, Cale Yarborough, Ron Bouchard, Jody Ridley, and Steve Moore. Also dropping by the wayside, Jeff Bodine, Dave Marcus, Lenny Pond, Richard Petty, Rick Wilson, Lake Speed, Bill Elliott, and Buddy Baker. So all of those cars are out of the race, but we still have several in the lead draft being led by Benny Parsons.
Bob, we've had over 30 lead changes in this race to this point, with 130 laps approximately expired. At the top of the show, you remember, we had hopes of perhaps seeing the fastest 500-mile race in auto racing history. Because of all the caution flags we've had, 31 laps of which to be exact, our chances for seeing the fastest 500-mile race in history are gone. When Lenny Pond set the track record back in 1978, there were only 17 laps of caution when Lenny came home at an average speed of almost 175 miles an hour. Put that into perspective. 500 miles, averaging 175 miles an hour, and he probably stopped 5 or 6 times en route to that. Our average speed up to this point at 130 laps gone by is 151. That's not too slow. I think that's quicker than I get back and forth to work.
We mentioned that Benny Parsons established a new 1-lap qualifying record here at 200.176. Bobby Isaac still holds the non-qualifying 1-lap record for this type of race car at 201.104. A.J. Foyt has the record for an Indy car here at 217, and of course Mark Donohue has the all-time record at 221 miles an hour. Now the positions again change out on the racetrack as Bobby Allison goes back around Kyle Petty as Petty settles back to 4th position.
Well, Bob, the last time by the main stands here in the front stretch, you heard another row coming up from the crowd. You know, the arena here is so large, it's just like a noise in the background. But what was going on is that they were seeing for the first time today, Kyle Petty actually made a move for the lead. And boy, did the crowd react to that. But what happened, Kyle dropped down out of the draft, the line of cars that was breaking the wind coming into their faces. Kyle dropped down and nobody went with him. He got down there all by himself, and a term that you hear a lot in NASCAR racing is like being drop kicked back toward the tail of the line of cars you were battling with. In Kyle's case, fortunately, he jerked the steering wheel to the right and got back in line real quickly, and he fell into 4th position in the line. Parsons moved back up front. Labonte there right in the center of your screen runs 2nd. Bobby Allison runs in 3rd place, and right behind Bobby is Kyle, who was able to get back into that line of race cars.
There are 10 cars in the lead draft, but a couple of them are more than a lap down. Kyle Petty is 18th in the point standings for the 1982 Winston Cup with 811. His best finish on the tour so far has been a 14th at North Wilkesboro, North Carolina. Here comes the lead draft down the tri-oval.
Well, Harry Gant, whose crew chief we heard from moments ago, is still out on the racetrack running with just 7 cylinders, and there is Harry running on the racetrack behind one of the real veterans of the NASCAR circuit, Buddy Arrington. And the only way that Harry can even be at speeds that are safe out there when you're running on 7 cylinders is to draft with somebody. So Harry is tucked in behind old friend Buddy Arrington, and Buddy is towing him around this racetrack. Obviously that puts extra stress and strain on the Arrington machine, and the one thing that Gant has to be careful of every once in a while he's got to move that car to the high side or the low side of Arrington to give it a little breath of fresh air, and also to keep the engine from overheating. But Harry Gant hooked up in a draft with Buddy Arrington and trying to finish this race.
And Harry Gant with the ESPN logo on the left front place where the lights would go on that car. We might remind you that our dedication to NASCAR Winston Cup racing will continue with 3 more live broadcasts. They will be at Michigan, at Richmond, and at North Wilkesboro, and we are planning a 4th race for you. So we will have all of the action of the 1982 battle for the Winston Cup. Harry Gant continuing to battle with Buddy Arrington out there on the racetrack. As we have completed 137 laps, we have 51 to go. Benny Parsons continues to set the pace, followed closely by Terry Labonte and Bobby Allison. We'll be back in just a moment. Benny Parsons, Terry Labonte, and Bobby Allison are the first 3 positions here in the Winston 500. Now on the racetrack in the backstretch, we notice that Darrell Waltrip has moved around Bobby Allison, so Waltrip takes over 3rd position here. There is quite a separation between the 2nd and 3rd place cars as Terry Labonte has moved ahead of this duo, Bobby Allison and Darrell Waltrip. And look at Allison move to the inside of Waltrip in turn number 3 and go back into 3rd position.
Well, the soft drink industry well represented. You see the right front fender on Bobby Allison's car flapping in the breeze from that incident earlier in the race. The soft drink industry well represented, but it's nothing soft about racing out here.
There is considerable amount of damage there to the front of Bobby Allison's car, with part of it flapping in the breeze, but obviously not causing any problem with the handling of that race car for Bobby Allison. The Gatorade machine is running in 3rd position at this time. Hueytown, Alabama, of course, the home of Bobby Allison. He is 44 years of age and won the first race on the Winston Cup Tour for this year at Daytona International Speedway. Darrell Waltrip won't have any portion of that, and he moves around Bobby Allison and back into 3rd position. So this great race out there for 3rd between Waltrip and Allison continues. Both of them have moved right back up on the back bumper of the Terry Labonte machine in 2nd position.
Well, Bobby Allison, something else he has to pay attention to is the condition of the structure of his race car. The outer skin up front is obviously not in very good condition. And of course, you start watching also those pins that hold on to the hood of this race car. But while they've been battling, surprisingly, Waltrip and Allison have caught the 2 leaders, Parsons and Labonte. And Waltrip looks like he's even thinking about trying to move to the lead. Now, as close as Labonte and Parsons are, I would expect Waltrip to go to the lead, but no, not quite enough. Terry Labonte lifts just ever so slightly and leaves Waltrip get in the line, as well as Bobby Allison. No, Labonte said, I don't think I want you running in front of me, Bobby. I'm going to hold that position and try and tack on to Waltrip.
Well, we talked about Darrell Waltrip not really running toward the front the last few laps, but he has decided to do so. Now right back in underneath almost the Benny Parsons car as they move by us down into turn number 1. Waltrip back in 2nd position, Labonte 3rd. The 4th car on your screen is the number 75 of Joe RUTTMAN, and he has been in this lead draft most of the afternoon. Unfortunately had problems at the beginning of the race and is not on the lap of the leaders.
We know there'll be one more series of pit stops that will take place for the leaders if all things go according to plan. So it really isn't necessary to lead at this point, and it's also pretty unlikely, as close as the lead pack has been all day, that anybody is going to hook up and run away with them. So there is, perhaps, to use a word or term that came up earlier in the race today, a little cat and mouse going on, but Waltrip has moved to the front for the first time in a long time, and I think that the one combination that the rest of the teams would fear when we get down to less than 20 laps to go, which will be coming up in just a few minutes, would be Benny Parsons and Darrell Waltrip hooking up in a draft and pulling away from the rest of the leaders.
Bobby Allison has dropped back several positions. He is now back in 5th as Neil Bonnet has gone into 4th position, and now Kyle Petty also going around Bobby Allison. So Allison on the inside of the racetrack is slowing down just a little, but these leaders are not slowing down by any means, and we go back to a Benny Parsons and Terry Labonte 1-2 situation. So the lead being changed here virtually on every lap as Parsons, Labonte, and Waltrip are battling for that lead, with Joe RUTTMAN, the 4th place car, in that draft, but not on the lead lap, and Neil Bonnet right behind RUTTMAN, and Kyle Petty right behind Neil Bonnet.
You know, the last month or so of NASCAR racing has been interesting. Some people who hadn't won in a long time won, and we've got a lot of people near the front today who are hungry for victory.
We'll have more of the Winston 500 from the world's fastest speedway in a moment. Bob Jenkins, Larry Nuber, and Dick Berggren covering the Winston 500 from Talladega, Alabama for you. Benny Parsons is the leader, Terry Labonte second, and Darrell Waltrip is running third with 43 laps to go. We mentioned a few minutes ago some of the drivers who have won more than one race here at Talladega. The drivers who have won one: Richard Petty, Dave Marcus, Dick Brooks, James Hilton, Cale Yarborough, Lenny Pond, Neil Bonnet, and Ron Bouchard. And a very interesting name being shown as a winner here at Talladega, Richard Brickhouse, who won the very first race here at Talladega.
Yeah, Bob, that was the year of the big strike when they first built this racetrack. Some of the drivers complained that the track was too big to have anything but an absolutely smooth surface. Some of them said the surface was not smooth enough to race on at those speeds, but some of the independent teams and some of the names that were not quite as well known as the front runners at the time went out and raced here, and Richard Brickhouse was able to ink his name into the record books. But since that time, I'll tell you, everybody wants to come to Talladega. Daytona, Darlington, and Talladega have certainly become the big three tracks on the Grand National Circuit as far as the high speeds go, and it seems to be those are the races that bring out all the teams, and everybody would like to do well here.
Benny Parsons and the Stacy Pontiac leading the number 11 Mountain Dew Buick in turn number 3. We now await the possibility of more pit stops, and Dick Berggren has more on that.
We just spoken to Waddell Wilson, Benny Parsons' crew chief, and he says if there's no yellow flag before about lap 156 or 157, that they're going to bring Benny in for the last time. It's going to be interesting to watch this last stop to see what the various teams do. Some will choose to throw 4 tires at the car and hope the car will handle better for the end of the race. Some will not do that, hoping that the lesser amount of time spent in the pits is going to be to their advantage when it all gets to the end. Some crews are going to try to get more fuel in, some are going to try to put less in, but no matter how it's cut, this is definitely the most important stop of the day.
So we'll be awaiting that stop in about 10 laps because we're on lap 148 now, and indications are that it'll be around 157 or 158 laps before Benny Parsons moves into the pit area. And both of our leaders now are lapping Dale Earnhardt, who has had a very unfortunate afternoon in several respects. Earnhardt, with damage to the front of that car, is several laps down and off of the pace. So Benny Parsons, Darrell Waltrip, and Terry Labonte are the first 3 positions here in the Winston 500 with 39 laps to go.
Bob, things have settled down to sort of the dog days of a 500-mile race, if you will. There you see Benny Parsons going around the number 64 car of Tommy Gale. Tommy, one of those independents running in the Elmo Langley stable. Elmo, a former race car driver himself, and he's one of those people who, you know, if it wasn't for the independents, NASCAR racing would not be what it is today. You see the lead pack filing by on the outside. Tommy Gale, somebody that all the other drivers have absolutely no intrepidations about running close to at these high speeds. That's a team and a driver that shows up for every one of the races and just stays in there and kind of toughs it out. And despite the fact they know their chances of running up front are really all not that great, they still support the sport.
And a black flag has been given to Dale Earnhardt, and he has moved into the pit area. He has won over $125,000 so far in 1982. But he has been black flagged because of that damage apparently to the front of the car. The NASCAR officials feeling that the hood on that car was about to come off. So the crew, as you can see, working on it right now.
Now, Earnhardt is the son of a famous racing driver from the past. His father, Ralph, was just an outstanding dirt tracker and ran for many years, and many of the early years of NASCAR as an organization. But right now, son Dale is having his problems here at Talladega in early 1982.
Well, look who's leading the Winston 500. By golly, Darrell Waltrip has passed Benny Parsons, and Darrell Waltrip now the leader with Benny Parsons running second. Terry Labonte still running in third position. The race summary to this point, with 148 laps completed, we have had 13 leaders and 34 lead changes. How's that for racing? And 6 caution periods, nothing for anything very serious. So we will be back in just a moment with more coverage of the Winston 500 from Talladega, Alabama. Back at Talladega, where the leaders are beginning to come in for pit stops now. Here is Kyle Petty, who was running in 6th position, in for a stop. We'll see how the Petty crew does getting Kyle back out there. Richard Petty dropped out of competition several laps ago because apparently of a fuel pickup problem. Kyle, though, running strong here this afternoon in the top 10. Neil Bonnet, who was running in 4th position, also has been in for a pit stop.
Bob, they're having a little bit of trouble with the right front wheel in this car. They're having problems getting the wheel on. Now, when we had the shop on the side, you could pick up on it. The crew really wrestled with that right front wheel. Hopefully all the lugs got on properly.
28.9-second pit stop for Kyle Petty. Not that really impressive, but he is going back out onto the racetrack as the leaders come by us, and Kyle Petty is going to go a lap down.
Well, that could be a factor if the rest of the leaders have to pit under, or rather have the opportunity to pit under the caution flag. If they pit under a green, well, then Kyle's going to be at a deficit because he is more than a lap down. He's not even all the way up to racing speed yet. Here is the lead pack coming down the backstretch. Petty is right now exiting turn number 2. Benny Parsons and Darrell Waltrip, Bobby Allison and Terry Labonte, the front runners here, and we expect them in momentarily. We are within 3 to 4 laps of pitting of all the lead cars.
Now let's see, Benny Parsons has moved back into the lead, and we had anticipated a pit stop, but he stays out there on the racetrack, and he may be coming in next time. When he does, we'll be there to cover it for you. Benny Parsons leading Darrell Waltrip across the start-finish line to complete lap number 155, and these leaders will be coming in very shortly for their final pit stop of the afternoon, and that is when the race can be won or lost.
It will be very critical, this final set of pit stops, particularly if we go as we have for about the last 150 miles, and that is without caution flag. Needless to say, if there's a caution flag in this last racing period of the race here, we got about 30 laps to go, and that's going to bunch everybody up. There's Benny Parsons dropping down low on the racetrack, Bob.
And Benny Parsons has gotten off the accelerator and is headed for pit road. A couple of cars are also coming in right ahead of him, including, I believe, Darrell Waltrip. Let's watch this series of pit stops. We'll concentrate on Benny Parsons, who is braking to a stop in his pit area. Also in is Bobby Allison in the Gatorade car. Allison to the bottom of your screen and Parsons at the top. We'll see again how it goes. Here is Nick Bergeron.
Wilson now with a rag cleaning the windshield. Here comes the crew. They're going to haul him out of here with only 2 outside tires. They did not change the inside tires on Benny Parsons' car. They did get the load of fuel in it, however.
Allison has a problem. Bobby Allison has a problem with that car. He is still not out of the pit area, and his crew is wondering what's going on.
Bob, I'll tell you, I'm not absolutely certain if this is something they can correct. Usually if they think they've got a problem they can solve, they're going to work a little harder. But right now, they look perplexed. They look disappointed. Now finally some movement as one of the crewmen is sent back behind the wall, perhaps to the truck on an errand. Darrell Waltrip, meanwhile, is in no problem yet there. You see the right side rubber being changed by the Junior Johnson Mountain Dew crew. Right front looks to be just about done. The right rear now done. A clean of the windshield. The gas is being topped off. Also, no inside rubber for Waltrip, and Terry Labonte out drag strips Waltrip.
Well, Bobby Allison's car is jacked up on the right side very high. They're looking underneath it on the right side. Any speculation?
No, they appear to be looking near the differential, perhaps along the transmission or drive shaft line. Now a crewman is crawling underneath there, and Bob, just no guess whatsoever. I saw Gary Nelson look under real quickly when Bobby had to make that sudden stop as he was pulling away, and I had the feeling that Gary knew what it was. I also had the feeling that Gary thought it was over.
We only have 30 laps to go in this race, and some tough luck for Bobby Allison, who earlier in the day suffered some bad luck when he ran into a car coming out of the pit area, and now he has a problem that we're really not certain of, but it has kept him into the pit area for several minutes. So the green flag is still out, but we'll take this break and be right back with Terry Labonte, now the leader, and Darrell Waltrip running in second place. Back at Talladega, Alabama, where ESPN is covering live for you the Winston 500. There will be another race here later in the year, the Talladega 500 on the 1st of August. Let's go down to Dick Bergman for a further explanation of what's wrong with Bobby Allison.
What's wrong with Bobby Allison is that the drive shaft in that car broke. Not only did it break, it is severely bent. There is no way they could have run with that drive shaft the way it was. They're in the process now of putting another one underneath the car. 2 members of the crew, 3 members of the crew under the car working frantically trying to get Bobby Allison back out. But this is a very long stop, and it will certainly put Bobby out of contention.
The leaders have completed their final pit stops of the afternoon. Benny Parsons, Darrell Waltrip, and Terry Labonte are the first 3 cars.
And Bob, if there are no cautions for the rest of this race, there it is. There's the final lap. Running in 4th position right now, it's just about a dead heat between Kyle Petty and Neil Bonnet as Waltrip again goes underneath Benny Parsons. It's almost a dead heat for 4th between Kyle and Neil, but they are about a whole turn behind this leading trio. Donnie Allison happens to be in a draft right now with Kyle and Neil, but Donnie is a couple laps back. We're still on the same lap with the leaders running in 6th position as Morgan Shepherd, but right there are the 3 main men for the final 28, now 27 laps of this race, and their wheels inside their minds begin to click and begin to roll, and the strategy begins to unfold. They're watching each other very carefully. Parsons is trying to find out where on this racetrack does Waltrip have the most power. Where does the car seem to be most stable? Right now, Labonte is getting an eyeful of both of them. Terry is thinking, geez, these guys are tough. Do I have enough to do it today?
Well, Terry Labonte would like very much to have a win on the Winston Cup Tour this year. He has finished 20th at Martinsville, but other than that, his worst finish has been 8th position, and he is the leader in the 82 battle for the Winston Cup. So Terry Labonte was running in 3rd place right now, would very much like to walk off with the victory here at Talladega. This is Kyle Petty, also Tim Richmond, and the car behind Richmond.
Yeah, well, Kyle has been battling with Neil, and right now Tim Richmond has been able to sandwich himself between Kyle and Neil Bonnet. Neil has had a rough day. We commented about that earlier, and that car looks to be a little more weather-worn than it was the last time we talked about it. He just has not had enough oomph to run up front, but Neil has hung right in there. Talk about going back in time a few years, putting Cale Yarborough in the Woods Brothers car.
Benny Parsons has moved back around Darrell Waltrip, so Parsons is now leading the race. Waltrip 2nd and Labonte is 3rd as those 2 cars go around Jimmy Means driving the Broadway Motors Buick. Jimmy has been competitive all afternoon, but not in the lead situation.
Well, Jimmy is another one of those independents who comes for every race and just loves to go stock car racing, and he's one of those guys who hangs in there and really hopes with all of his faculties each week that maybe he can sneak into the top 10. Jimmy Means, a former Nashville track champion and a guy who's been around the Grand National Trail for, gosh, going on about 10 years now.
Now a little bit of distance being opened up between the 2nd and 3rd place cars of Darrell Waltrip and Terry Labonte. But Labonte, as the cars go into the 3rd and 4th turns, is able to close up the distance just a little bit. Here they come off of turn number 4 onto the tri-oval area of the Speedway. And the 3-car draft continues here. Again, these 3 cars apparently are going to be in the contention for the lead when the checkered flag drops, as there is about a half a lap separation between the 3rd and 4th place cars. Here in the tri-oval, we notice a car smoking very badly.
I think it's Joe Ruttman, Bob.
That is Joe Ruttman, who has had problems all afternoon, and now a billow of smoke coming from the rear of that race car as he slows down going into turn number 1.
It'll be interesting to see as we look at Joe's winnings to date, $75,000. Most of them, of course, in the J.D. Stacy team when he was running the number 2 car would go back up front. Interesting to see whether or not we get a caution. There has been no indication from Harold Kinder that the caution flag is going to come out. I see him straining his own eyes right now, seeing whether or not there is debris on this racetrack here to the tri-oval. Apparently, all the officials are satisfied, and we remain under a green flag condition. 165 laps go by as the sand begins to run out of the hourglass. And if anybody outside of these 3 drivers has anything left, now is when they have to turn it loose. Those anybody's might be Kyle Petty, might be Neil Bonnet, might be Morgan Shepherd. That doesn't look likely. As Bob pointed out to you a minute ago, it's probably going to come down to the 3 of them. Remember something else. You notice that Labonte has now moved himself between Waltrip and Parsons. Now we have a yellow. The yellow flag is out on the racetrack, Bob.
All right, the concern of NASCAR officials, of course, is there oil on the racetrack that is a hindrance and can be very dangerous to the other drivers? They apparently have made that determination, so the crews will go now out onto the racetrack and sop off the oil that has been placed down apparently by the car driven by Joe RUTTMAN. Neil Bonnet is also slowing down in that Wood Brothers Ford as he comes into the pit area, or at least is down on the apron of the racetrack and appears to be headed for pit road. So our driver that was running in 5th position, Neil Bonnet, is headed for pit road.
Well, there are a lot of people who will tell you that even though there haven't been that many victories over the past half-decade for the Wood Brothers team, that this may well be the first chair in all of NASCAR racing. Though Neil is motoring slowly right now, if it is just a problem, for instance, gas, you know, the Fords are a little more temperamental when it comes to fuel consumption. There are a lot of advantages to running a Ford in Grand National racing, but one of the things they have to be very careful of, and guess what? It's not gas.
No, it isn't.
Neil Bonnet certainly answered that question early on. We're about ready to comment that as slow as he was moving, because we were under caution flag, he still would have been able to stay in the lead lap. Well, all the leaders are going to take the last opportunity to check over their cars. They're going to check the tire wear. They'll make a decision as to whether or not to change some of the rubber on this, whether or not to change just outside or inside. And Dick Bergman is right down there on top of the new
I'm with
crew.
Darrell Waltrip's crew. It's Junior. In Darrell Waltrip's pit, when the yellow flag came out, Junior Johnson just stuck 4 fingers up in the air. Everybody knew what that meant. They got 4 tires ready. You see it, the 4 tires are going on the car now. That was Junior himself clearing Darrell's windshield off for him. Car's still up in the air. They're getting the right rear tire on. Down goes the jack, and off goes Darrell Waltrip.
Well, Terry Labonte got out of the pit area considerably ahead of Darrell Waltrip, but of course we are under a yellow as the cars will bunch up now behind the pace car. We have 21 laps to go, and it should be a tremendous dash to the finish. We'll be back with it in just a moment. Not only are points important, but also prize money, and there is $391,475 available for the Winston 500. The winner will take home $32,500. Second place, $22,100. Third place, $16,990. And the 4th place finisher will walk off with a cool $13,300 for today's race. An interesting situation. I don't believe Benny Parsons came in. Most of the other leaders did, and Parsons still out there. You can see that Darrell Waltrip leads in the amount of money won so far this year with $183,000. Allison second with $174,000. Dale Earnhardt is 3rd with more than $125,000. Benny Parsons is 4th in money winning so far this year with $117,000, and Yarborough 5th with $116,000.
Bob, the NASCAR trail has become really one of the most lucrative and one of the most gratifying for those teams that don't have an opportunity to win all the time. There you see 6 through 10 in winnings up to this point. Labonte, Richard Petty, Ron Bouchard, Harry Gant, who won last week, and Jody Ridley still looking for his first win of this year. In 1981, for instance, 22 drivers won over $100,000 in NASCAR racing. That was the most ever in any form of American driving. Now, there are some people who are not going to go home with prize winnings today. They're going to go home a few dollars poor and probably a whole lot more sun.
Still under caution, 169 laps have been completed, 19 to go. Benny Parsons is the leader. Terry Labonte running in 2nd position. Darrell Waltrip is 3rd. Running in 4th at this time is Kyle Petty, and the 5th place car is Morgan Shepherd. We'll be back with the green in a moment. 5 cars are on the lead lap with less than 16 laps to go. Darrell Waltrip, Kyle Petty, Benny Parsons, Terry Labonte are the first 4 cars. Morgan Shepherd is running 5th. A couple of laps down in 6th position is Tim Richmond, then Donnie Allison, and then Dale Earnhardt. But look at this nose-to-tail battle here toward the end of the race. The yellow is out. Another caution period. Another caution period has come over Talladega, Alabama Speedway. We'll be checking to see the reason for the yellow, but the car's slow once again.
Well, the lead pack, as they came through the tri-oval that time, you saw Darrell Waltrip waving his hand. I think he was signaling to the rest of the drivers in that pack that he saw the caution. He was hoping that everybody else behind him saw that caution flag. Darrell was looking ahead at Harold Kinder, who was displaying that yellow flag, and Darrell telling everybody behind him, hey fellas, we got to slow down.
So the pace car comes back out onto the racetrack, and we again slow the pace of this field with Darrell Waltrip leading. And I don't know, Larry, can you predict a winner at this time?
No, you can't, Bob, but here's something that does not surprise me. Now, what happens right here is that in a restart of a Grand National race, the slower cars move back down to the bottom of the racetrack so that the lead pack is all by itself. There are so few cars left in this race that they can take a chance on changing the right side tire on this car to make it go faster. He'll move back up to the tail of the field. He will not have any slower cars behind him. There are enough laps left and few cars left that he can take this chance. I am not surprised.
Rubber on both sides of that race car, and of course the topping off of the fuel tank. I was a bit surprised last caution period that Benny did not come in, and now here he is. I can't understand why he didn't come in last time if he thought he needed the rubber.
Well, now he had the chance, see, and usually they do save the very best set of tires for a situation exactly like this. Waddell knows that both Labonte and Waltrip have brand new tires, so they figured that they'll not get another opportunity. Let's try it.
Here is the race summary as we take another break before we go back to the green. At the end of 173 laps, we have had 15 leaders, 43 lead changes, and a total of 8 caution periods. Back at Talladega, Darrell Waltrip is in the lead, but where does he want to be on the last lap to win this race? Well, Larry Newber asked him that question.
Well, that's a good question. You know, there's been a lot of pros and cons about that for years. It depends on who you're racing. That's the bottom line. If you have the faster car, then you really have the option of leading or following. Where the start-finish line is, probably smart money would say you ought to be behind the guy so that you could slingshot by him and not give him the opportunity to do that. Then the other things come into play. What if there's traffic, or what if he cuts you off and takes away your options? So 90% of the time, I'm going to be in the front, no matter whether I'm fastest or slowest. I'm going to take my chance. He's got to second guess me. He's got to figure out if I'm going to go high, go low. And I can look at him in the mirror and see what he's thinking about doing too. So I'm going to lead that last lap if it's all possible.
Well, J.D. Stacy would like very much to bring home a winner this afternoon with Terry Labonte behind the wheel, and Dick Berggren is with J.D. Stacy.
Mr. Stacy, you've also got Benny Parsons. He just made a pit stop. He's going to have to charge back through. What's your feeling right now about the potential for Benny Parsons or Terry Labonte to win this race?
Well, at the end of the race, when the checker flag falls, I'll be happy if him or Labonte is up there, either one.
J.D. Stacy, sponsor for 2 cars in contention to win this event.
Well, certainly Benny Parsons has demonstrated his ability to run faster than anybody else today and during qualifying. The question is, can he catch back up and go into the lead?
A couple other things to consider, Bob. Darrell Waltrip has been in the lead bunch in the final lap of the last 2 races here, and has he been out snookered? Has he been outdriven by another driver? Has he not had enough horses? Whatever. He hasn't won down there yet. Terry Labonte has said he'd like to be in 2nd place on the white flag lap.
Back down to Dick Berggren.
Neil Bonnet, you had kind of a tough day out here this afternoon.
Yeah, we were hanging on all day trying to stay with the lead draft, and right there at the end, the thing just felt like it broke a rod or something. The motor just exploded going in the first turn down there. So looks like it's going to be a good trophy race to the end, though.
Seems like a lot of motors blowing up today. Is that true or not?
Boy, it's a pretty torrid pace. They're standing on those things wide open, putting a lot of punishment on the engines, and it's showing up.
Neil Bonnet, one of those fellows whose engine couldn't take the punishment today.
All right, thank you, Dick, and we anticipate a green flag this time around. They have the familiar 2 abreast restart here. Darrell Waltrip is in the lead, exactly where he said he wanted to be, but everybody we talked to said it depends on who you're running with on the track.
And there are the 5 cars that are in contention for victory on the outside. In order, Waltrip, Kyle Petty, Terry Labonte, Morgan Shepherd, and Benny Parsons are on the outside. Watch them close when this green flag drops. 12 this time through, 11 laps to go.
And the cars enter the tri-oval and anticipating the green flag, and the green does come out, and so we go back to racing Darrell Waltrip leads him down here. Kyle Petty is tucked right in on his back bumper. They head for the 33-degree banking at Talladega, Alabama. Terry Labonte right in underneath Kyle Petty. They go around Bobby Allison and Tim Richmond. Allison has suffered some very unfortunate luck here this afternoon and is off the pace. Look at Richmond move right up into the path of Morgan Shepherd.
I tell you, when they put aggression into Webster's dictionary, there's a footnote that says, in parentheses, Richmond. Tim Richmond is not about to be intimidated by anybody or any situation. He's still trying to get up front, still trying to pick up another lap. He's in the top 10, but Richmond is going all out, trying to finish as high as he can. Although it looks like Benny Parsons has been able to get around Tim Richmond now.
All right, this will complete lap number 178. We've got 10 laps to go. Still anybody's race. Benny Parsons has moved around. Tim Richmond is now in 4th position. He'll be moving up on the bumper of Terry Labonte, who is in 3rd. Darrell Waltrip continues to show the way in that Mountain Dew Buick. Darrell Waltrip, 35 years of age, from Franklin, Tennessee, being pursued by Kyle Petty. We'll see if Kyle makes a move here on the backstretch.
You know, Bob, as I watch these 4 guys, and I know what's going on right now in their minds, and I'm watching the clock tick down, I almost feel like I'm at a tennis match where we're watching Borg and McEnroe. You almost want to be quiet, step back, and just watch this. It's like a symphony going on. Who's going to do what? Who's going to make what move? When are they going to do it? What's going on in their minds? Boy, it gets really exciting and thrilling, and it gets very pensive down at this point in the race.
Well, that was a very important statistic there on the screen a second ago. Kyle Petty started this race in 15th position. He qualified at 194.686, compared with a 200-mile-an-hour lap recorded by the pole sitter Benny Parsons. So Kyle has done a great job this afternoon and is certainly in a position to win the Winston 500.
Well, Parsons has dropped off about 3 or 4 car lengths from Darrell Waltrip, Kyle Petty, and Labonte. Between Labonte and Benny, now he's caught back up. Parsons will just barely work it. There he is into your screen. He lost a little bit of ground going down the backstretch that time. Richmond continues to run in this line of cars that are like beads on a string. Remember, the 5th car in line, Richmond, the dark blue number 2 with the yellow chevrons, a lap down or 2 laps down. But Morgan Shepherd, also on the lead lap, runs 5th, and he's right behind Tim Richmond.
I'm very impressed with Morgan Shepherd's performance here this afternoon. His best finish of the year was a 3rd at Bristol and has done a great job here on the super speedways. And of course, Morgan won his first Grand National race on one of our ESPN broadcasts last year.
Well, Bob, we're to the point in the race. Maybe I'll ask you a question. You've watched this race pretty closely. Who do you think? Or is it whom?
I was going to ask you that question first.
Oh, you're going to put me on the spot, huh?
I don't know. I'll tell you what. I think that Darrell Waltrip can stave off his challengers and win this race.
You know, I suppose it would be cheap for me to go along with you, but the
yes,
way
it would.
the way that team has been operating the last couple of years, you got to think that Waltrip has the inside line as to how to bring home this victory. But when you think about sentimentality, I remember a year ago in the same situation, Ricky Rudd was running up near the front. And if you want to go with sentiment, you got to go with Kyle Petty. Kyle up just barely touching the fence, it appeared. If he did not touch the fence, he was pretty darn close, I'll tell you that. But Bob, I'm going to take the cheap way out. I'm going to go along with you and Waltrip, although I think Parsons certainly would be, based on today's and this week's performance, the most deserving winner.
All right, this is Terry Labonte and Morgan Shepherd battling for position, and they touch. The cars touch, and Shepherd momentarily out of control, but gathers it in once again. So even with just a few laps remaining, it is still a tremendous battle out there on the track.
Well, Morgan was on the racetrack close with Tim Richmond. It looked like it might have been Richmond whom he was close to when Morgan got out of shape. Morgan really didn't look like he was going to be in it in that quest for victory in the final couple of laps. So fortunately, in this particular situation, though he's lost ground on the racetrack, it really is not going to jeopardize Morgan's position. And of course, we heard from Joe Ruttman earlier that Morgan is not feeling that well anyway, so he'll probably be content just to sit back and watch what happens. There's a familiar back.
The King, Richard Petty, moves to pit road to watch his son's performance, and Richard, I'm sure, hoping for a win by his son Kyle here today. Kyle right now back in 4th position. Here they come through the tri-oval. We'll call them off for you. It's still Darrell Waltrip in the lead. 183 laps complete. Waltrip and Benny Parsons running first and second. It is Terry Labonte and Kyle Petty running in third and fourth position.
And we trust there is at least one more Petty, perhaps back home in Level Cross, watching the progress of the third generation protege. That being, of course, Kyle. Although Waltrip and Parsons have opened up some ground between themselves and Labonte and Kyle Petty. Look at the distance. There is the interval. They're still not in the picture. They just finally get it. It looks to be about 100 yards or maybe 20 car lengths.
So at this point, a two-car battle, but that could become a four-car battle momentarily, as you can see right now. Terry Labonte closing the distance between himself and second place Benny Parsons. Once again, into the 18-degree banking of the tri-oval, completing lap number 184. 184 laps completed, and we have 4 more to go. Darrell Waltrip and Benny Parsons, Terry Labonte and Kyle Petty are the drivers that can win this race.
You know, in a Major League Automobile race, usually the race does not unfold exactly the way everybody thinks. Now here's Parsons making a move. I know it's late in the race and there are those who might think this is drama, but I'm not real sure. What's going on here is Parsons and Waltrip are continuing to test one another. Neither one of them is really showing the entirety of his hand at this point. I was about ready to say that usually a race doesn't unfold exactly the way that most of the people would predict, but I think if everybody had to predict what to expect on laps 186, 187, 188 here, they all would have said, well, Parsons and Waltrip look strong, and Labonte is always in it at the end. And here it is, exactly the way most people thought it might happen.
The Stacy Pontiac of Benny Parsons leading the Mountain Dew Buick of Darrell Waltrip. In third position is the Stacy Buick driven by Terry Labonte, and then the Kyle Petty car, the STP Pontiac running in fourth. Benny Parsons has the lead right now. Darrell Waltrip and Labonte and Kyle Petty all looking for an opportunity to get by and assume the lead. They are entering turn number 4 now. Coming off of it onto the tri-oval, completing lap number 186 in just a few feet. And we will have 2 more laps to go, and this is when it's all going to happen.
Coming through the tri-oval, going past the start-finish line, Harold Kinder held up 2 fingers to the lead quartet. I don't know that at 195 or 200 miles per hour you can actually read the fingers on the flagman towering about 20 feet above you as you whisk underneath him, but at least he attempted to give them the signal. At this point, if I were Labonte, I think my move would be to stay right behind Waltrip to see what Darrell's going to do. You know Darrell's going to try some type of move on this last lap. Remember, everybody has radios. They know exactly where they are. Let's see how they play it. Waltrip's going to try something. How long will he wait? Will he do it in the north turns? Turns 1 and 2, will he wait for the final second coming down through the tri-oval? Remember that Waltrip has been beaten in the tri-oval in the last 2 consecutive races he's competed here. Labonte's got to try something. When will he do it, and what will Kyle Petty attempt?
The crowd has been on its feet for several laps, each individual rooting for his particular driver. We are on the final lap of the Winston 500. They're in the second turn, headed for the backstretch. Benny Parsons goes to the inside of the racetrack. Darrell Waltrip moves to the outside of him. Terry Labonte tucked right in behind Darrell Waltrip. Now the car's down the 4,000-foot backstretch into the 33-degree banking of turn number 3. Darrell Waltrip has moved in the lead. Terry Labonte has moved into second position with Benny Parsons riding right beside him. Kyle Petty in fourth. Here they come off of the 4th turn.
Parsons is frozen. He can't move.
Onto the tri-oval, and this is going to be the checkered flag. Here comes Darrell Waltrip. Labonte tried to make a move, but he cannot do it. Darrell Waltrip wins the Winston 500. Terry Labonte finishing in second position. Benny Parsons was third, and Kyle Petty was fourth.
Well, Bob, Benny Parsons made, I guess, the ultimate chance. He decided to do something unusual on the final lap. He felt he was not in the right position. We saw Benny drop way down low coming out of turn number 2 and go down the backstretch. I think he had hopes of letting Waltrip go by, moving back up in line and maybe repassing Darrell in the tri-oval, but it just didn't work. Remember, we commented that Terry Labonte's probably his best move would to stay tacked right on Waltrip's back bumper. That's what he did, and once that Parsons got down on the inside all by himself, he couldn't move. The draft was going by on the high side of him. He had no accelerator left.
Darrell Waltrip has won his 4th race in the 1982 season. He was the winner this year at Bristol, at Atlanta. He also won North Wilkesboro, and he has moved into victory lane, or is about to right now, here in Talladega, Alabama. Darrell Waltrip has won in the Mountain Dew Buick, and a tremendous victory here this afternoon. I cannot conceive of driving 500 miles on this highly banked track at 200 miles an hour, but Darrell Waltrip has done it better than anybody else today. He is in victory lane, and so is Dick Berggren.
Darrell Waltrip is getting a big kiss from his wife, Stevie. We'll get to him in just a minute. He's a busy man right now. They are awfully happy. Darrell, congratulations on yet another Winston Cup victory.
Oh, me. What a race. Didn't know what to do, you know. This racing like this is going to make old man out of me before it's my time, but I would like to thank the good Lord, because he rode with me all day and brought me through this victory, and I'm so proud of this Mountain Dew Buick. I'd like to thank Goodyear Tires, because I'm going to tell you one thing, the tires took a punishment today, and they stood up and they took it, and so did our Valvoline oil, so just want to say hi to all those folks.
When did you decide on the strategy that brought you to the lead, Darrell?
I was a little surprised that Benny passed me when he did. I think Benny really felt like he had maybe a little faster car than we had, but I knew with that number of cars, 3 or 4 of us, if I was in second place, I thought that might be the right place to be. I just luck. You know, you do it over, you probably lose. So that's why you have to be so thankful when you end up in victory circle here at Talladega with a 4 or 5 car finish like that, because anybody could have won that race. My hat's off to Benny and Waddell. They did a super job, and so did Terry Labonte. It's going to be a heck of a year for him, and we look like we got our hands full as far as that Winston Cup Championship is concerned.
How tired are you?
Well, now, at this point in time, I'm not as tired as I was. Hey, Junior.
Junior Johnson, the man that put it all together. Junior, the last pit stop you came in, you took 4 tires and a couple of loads of fuel. Was that the strategy you really wanted to do all along?
Well, that'd been the best set of tires we'd had all day long, so we just laid them back, and we felt like that was going to be the last set we was going to put on, so we put everything we had on it and just hope it was good enough.
Were you really worried about Benny at the end, Junior?
Well, anytime 4 cars are running as close as them was, you got to worry about anybody. And, you know, we felt like we was in good shape if we, you know, got a good push going down the back stretch, and evidently Darrell did, because he came on strong down the front stretch.
Darrell, there were a lot of engines blown today. Was the pace unusually rapid today?
Well, there's one thing I can say. Since he's here and he's my boss, I'll say this in front of him and God and everybody. He builds the best race car and the best race motors. And I punished this thing, and it stood up there and took it all day long. And that's a tribute to Junior and the entire team, Jeff and Mike and Doug and all the boys back to the shop. Just fantastic. One whale of a race team.
You guys came in second in the pit crew competition today. How important is that from the perspective of winning a long race like this?
We wanted to be in here. That's the most important thing, and we did what we had to do to get here.
Okay, Darrell Waltrip, victory lane at Talladega.